Welcome to today's meeting of the Adult and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we begin, can I remind everyone to only turn on their microphones when they wish or are invited to speak. Please speak clearly and loudly, because some of us are slightly going deaf. I have received apologies from Fiona Barber from Health Watch Leicester and Leicestershire. Mr. Cash Bayani is present for Fiona and joins us online. Item 1 is the minutes of the meeting held on June the 2nd, 2025. The first item is minutes. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? I have a proposer, a seconder, Mr. Lovegrove. Next agenda item is question time. I can confirm that I've received no questions. Agenda item 3 is questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. No such questions have been received. Agenda item 4 is urgent items. I have no urgent items. Next, we have declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any interest they wish to declare? Mr. King.
Yeah, just in relation to the report about the museums, I'm also a member of Harbour District Council. Thank you.
That's Mr. King and Mrs. Page. Item 6 is declarations of the party whip. Do any members wish to declare the party whip? So no, Andy. Item 7, I have not received any petitions. Item 8 is the preparation for adulthood review report, pages 11 to 20 of the agenda pack. I would like to welcome the chairman, Mr. Mark Bulls, and spokespersons Mrs. Taylor and Mrs. Danks of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee to the meeting to hear the presentation of this report, which provides an update on the actions taken following the recommendations from a peer review on the effectiveness of the current pathway to adulthood and subsequent corporate preparation for adulthood review, which is a joint review across Children and Family Services and Adults Communities Department. We have the lead member for Adults and Communities, Mr. Abbott, with us today. Welcome, Mr. Abbott. We also have the lead member for Libraries, Heritage and Adult Learning, Mr. Crook, with us today. Welcome, Mr. Crook. Injahat Lehal, Assistant Director, will introduce this item, and he is joined by Claire McWilliams, Head of Services. Indy, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So, as detailed by Mrs. Knight, this report is a joint piece of work between Adults and Communities and Children's and Family Services. It's really an update report around where we're at as a programme. Page 12 of the paper highlights the 6 work streams, of which the report then updates on each of the key areas. Claire McWilliams, who's on my right, is the Head of Service for Adult Social Care and will be able to give some key points around the report.
Good afternoon, thank you. I won't read the report verbatim, but I'll pick out some key highlights. So the aim of the review is to establish a model that will work with children from birth to adulthood, reduce independency and maximising independence. It will aim to identify and understand the full cohort of children that need to transition through to adult services, and it will understand the current model that ensures it delivers good outcomes for children and young people in line with their aspirations. We aim to establish the demand data and make recommendations for clear preparation for adulthood pathways for those young children and young people. So the project has been structured around the following work streams: process mapping, benchmarking, commissioning, data and finance, published information, and parent carer engagement. So I'll give you a brief overview of each work stream and progress that we've made in accordance with each one. So for process mapping, the full end-to-end process mapping for both children's and adults has been completed, with a joint workshop held with workers from both children's and adults in June 2025, with key findings and comments from frontline practitioners. The workstream identified several areas of improvement, including establishing a criteria to identify young people who are likely to require a transition to adult social care, rather than using the current method of the Education, Health and Care Plan as an indicator, and establish a more efficient process for assessing and assigning cases. Work has already commenced to look at a digital solution to improve the current identification method, alongside the potential to develop a robust interface to connect the IT systems currently in place across children's and adult social services. It aims to improve data sharing and continuity of care with consideration for a unified platform. Moving on to the benchmarking work stream. So a joint benchmarking framework for children's and adult services was used to engage with 17 local authorities, which were selected based on both proximity and demographic similarity to Leicestershire, as well as information obtained from the National Benchmarking Forum. Some of the key recommendations were a proactive joint approach to preparation for adulthood to be adopted from age 14, alongside reviewing and enhancing methods for identifying young people needing a transition. The creation of a comprehensive pathway plan involving all relevant services, as well as broadening enablement services to include structured life skills development. Work to establish a cross-service protocol that outlines roles, timelines and expectations, and that's embedded with strength-based practice, and also to explore co-location, shared supervision and joint cohort meetings to improve frontline integration. The commissioning work stream. So a shared understanding of the strategic commissioning has been established across children and family services and adults and communities. This includes assessing local needs, aligning priorities and resources, and shaping the provider market and redesigning services to meet demand. Again, a joint workshop was held to explore barriers, challenges and opportunities within commissioned services. And as a result, a joint report outlining the key findings has been finalised. Some of the recommendations include establishing a dedicated commissioning function for education, inclusion and special educational needs and disabilities within children and family services, engaging stakeholders to co-develop a shared educational vision, provider contracts to align with progression and enablement principles that improve transition pathways from high-cost placements and explore dual registration models for complex care provision, and co-production of guidance materials with parents and young people to enhance communication and share positive case studies to promote best practice. Moving on to data and finance, a validated analysis of adult service data has been completed with a final report capturing the findings. They included a detailed review to be conducted to confirm that the Young Adult Disability Service is appropriately resourced for current and future caseloads, reporting mechanisms to be introduced to compare service packages across children's and adult services that support financial oversight and strategic planning. Progression on the analysis and verification of children's service data has experienced delays, which has impacted the overall project timelines. The published information workstream is currently paused and will resume later in the project once the final service redesigns have been completed. And the final workstream, the parent and carer engagement. So a survey was conducted with parents, carers, young people and professionals that resulted in 75 responses. The key themes and proposed recommendations have been analysed and documented, which will form the wider project and are summarised to include introduction of a longer handover period between children and adult services to support better preparation and understanding of individual needs. Create a comprehensive directory of services, contact details and a glossary of key terms to help families to navigate the transition process. Increase the availability of suitable placements for individuals with physical disabilities and complex health needs. The findings of the surveys have been shared with the Parent Carer Forum, who have confirmed that their views and experiences have been accurately represented. So just finally to conclude, the report has been prepared to provide an update on the progress of the Corporate Preparation for Adulthood review, and it outlines the significant work that's been undertaken across each of the work streams. It reflects the strong commitment across adults and communities and children and family services to improving the transitional experience for young people. The timescale for completion of the final business case for change is scheduled for mid-October, and a high-level plan is attached as an appendix for your reference. The committee is invited to review the progress of the review to date and to raise any questions or comments for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from members? Mrs. Page.
Thank you very much. And as per usual, always me to open a can of worms. Thank you very much for the report. And there was a lot of rhetoric to get our heads around. But I've got a couple of very basic questions. One, going forward, how are you going to propose to monitor the outcomes? Because as this is going to develop, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, what is the measure of success and how you're going to monitor outcomes? The other thing I am really concerned about, it is one of those, it's point 28 on page 14. Collaborate with district council and strategic housing leads to improve housing options to explore the use of assessment flats to evaluate independent readiness. Now, we know there's a shortage of flats. We know there is a shortage of housing, especially at the present situation. So if this is an integral part of this process, how are we going to overcome it? And for instance, I'm a member of Harbour District Council. We don't even allocate our housing needs. It all goes through housing associations. So talk me around that a little bit. And my last but final question is in point 48, it says has been identified as saving under development, which in the 2025 medium-term financial strategy. The way I'm reading this, there is a lot of extra staffing and resources required for this. So how does this equate to savings going forward? I can see it to be a very costly addition to the process. So will that be reflected and evaluated and brought to us in the October report? And thank you very much in advance for the answer.
So in terms of outcomes, are you thinking about the outcomes for individuals or for the project as a whole? Okay, so I think for the individuals for outcomes, we've already got measures in place as part of the review process of when we're reviewing our packages, when we're reviewing the journey for young people. In terms of the project, we're reporting back the outcomes of the project back to the board on a regular basis. And when we've got the final model that we will be looking at, there'll be measures that are put in place to measure the outcomes and the effectiveness of the overall project as we develop. At the moment, we've very much been looking at the exploration of the current model and the barriers and opportunities for improvements. So as we go forward, we'll look at how we can embed those outcome measures going forward that we can report into the board and into senior management team as well as to the committee.
May I just come back through you, Chairman? Thank you. So what you're saying, it is a life process of learning and suck it as you see, so to speak. And when are you hoping to have a good idea of what works best, or how you're going to take that forward?
So the final, the design phase will be, the reports will be ready mid-October, and we will then start to look at embedding the new ways of working towards the end of the towards the end of this year. So it's very much at the moment a work in progress in the review. So this is an update on the progress that we've made so far. So it will be an ongoing and continual journey that we will be able to report back to you on progress.
And Mrs. Page, I'll take the other two questions, and I'll take them in reverse though. And it's kind of linked to that, the outcomes bit as well. So I think your question was like, how are you going to make a saving, basically based on increased staffing structure, etc. So if we have young people going through this new process, so identifying children at a younger age, putting more infrastructure and support around them at an earlier stage as well, getting them ready for adulthood. So when they hit 16, 17 into 18, the plan is to make sure, or to try to make sure that those children, as young people are, their independence is maximised as possible. So if we took an example, I'm going to give you a couple of raw examples. So person going through a system, living at home, has complex needs, so quite complex learning disabilities, and let's say they have no intervention as such. They may go into adulthood and go into quite a high cost placement for 18 onwards, and that 18 would go on to 65, 70, 75, and you know, that's potentially quite a substantial amount of money. The plan here, I guess, is to intervene at an earlier stage, work with a young person, family, friends, peers, cohorts, providers, put some wraparound resource around them to make sure that actually we're supporting those people to be as independent as possible. So that's not to say they won't still need that long-term placement. They may still need that long-term complex placement, but if that person's placement without the intervention was £3,000 a week, for argument's sake, our intervention maybe, you know, impact may be small, but it might be worth £200 a week of package costs. So you've got a 3,000 versus a 2,800 per week. Your ongoing saving from that one package is quite significant. That's one child going through the system. So you've got a staffing structure here, which you need to pay for and resource, but you've got a person's outcomes being met at a better level and their ongoing support being at a reduced level. And that's where your MTFS and your savings balance up.
Through you, Chairman. So the saving, is that a net saving or a gross saving? Because if it's just £200 on the placement, but we're talking £1,000 in staff for the wraparound service, then, you know...
Then it doesn't make sense, does it, essentially? So it's going to have to be a net saving. So you take into account your structure you'd be putting into services and what you'd be boosting up here. But that's an example there. But the £200 is one person. So you imagine the amount of children coming through the system and us trying to support as many people as we can to achieve independence. So that's your bit around. And a lot of it can come down to, like, you know, Claire talked around the commissioning of services, how we work with providers and contracts and contracting for progression. You know, that's a different way of working. So it's not your bog standard, give a provider a contract and go and deliver it. You're looking at developing a commissioning model, which you incentivize providers, you incentivize the market, you monitor, you review, you constantly have resource attached to it to make sure that they work. So a lot of work needs to go into the models, but it's not beyond it's a very doable approach. It's hard. It's not an easy thing, because if it was easy, everyone would have done it. But
Sorry, last intervention. So how does that work to the district and the housing need? And also, how does that tally towards the provision we as county council, whereas we're also buying homes, etc.? Just talk me around that, because thank you. And thank you.
It's fine. So you made the point around kind of the I guess that's linked to your second point a bit, isn't it? So the lack of housing, I guess, within district councils, and a lot of it is run through housing associations or developers have a lot of property. So part of our, correct if I'm wrong here, Claire, but as part of the model, it would be for the council, whether it's children's or adults, to work with developers, housing associations to identify properties. So there's potentially properties out there that we can tap into. So we've got relationships with like NCHA, got a strategic contract with them around developing new provision for adults with disabilities. It's a strategic partnership, and there's a key area around growth. So working with developers, housing associations to develop provision for us that we can then utilise for essentially step through facilities. So child goes into it, or young person goes into a step through facility. We work with them, the provider works with them, and hopefully get them into a more independent setting. The bit, I guess, is the bit with working with district councils and borough councils around their provision. Is I kind of agree with you to a certain extent that actually because the lack of provision that the districts and boroughs have, it's going to be very difficult for us to tap into it, if at all, actually. So I think our route would be more with the housing associations and the developers of specialist provision. And there's quite a few out there that we work with as well. So we've got a programme of working for new developments for supported living and some residential provision as well. Okay.
Right, we've got a number of questions from members. If we could move to Mr. Balls, who's online with us, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for not being there in person. Firstly, I want to congratulate the officers for the work done on this. We had a report at the previous scrutiny meeting I chaired around care leavers, and the work that's going in to that area is amazing, and I know the hard work it takes to coordinate this. One of the comments that was raised during that scrutiny meeting was that often we find this is the point where young adults fall between the gaps of different responsibilities. So I'm really pleased that work's being done to try and bridge that gap. I do have two questions. The first one is on point 14. And it was about identifying those people who are in need early. And I just wanted to know if that work started already, regardless of whether this report's fully adopted. Will that initiative, has it already started, and will it happen anyway? Because I think that's vitally important. And if we aren't identifying early, I think we can get more people falling between the gaps, like I just mentioned. And my second question is, there was examples of support for care leavers shared in that previous scrutiny meeting I chaired. For example, one was grants to attend university and further education. Regardless of this report, will that investment and that support be offered to care leavers? Because I think that's a really important initiative that's already in place that I wouldn't like to see lost. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we are aware, we've been aware for a while that using the education, health and care plan as an indicator for identifying young people that will need a transition is not effective anymore, just given the sheer number of young people who are now issued with an education, health and care plan. Work is already underway, and we are looking at some digital solutions to replace that methodology. As you can appreciate, it's quite complicated and multifaceted, trying to get the information from children and family services and to accurately identify. But that work, to assure you, is already taking place, and we had a workshop last week to look at some new digital solutions that we want to take forward with a view to piloting that in the coming months. So that is something that we're keen to progress regardless of this this review. And the second question was around the care leavers, the support for care leavers. So whilst this corporate review isn't just focused on care leavers, obviously the care leavers are integral to the review, and the support that's provided to care experienced young people will obviously form part of the work that we do. The focus of this review has been around the journey for all young people transitioning from children's to adult services. But I think the majority of the focus has been on those young people that have got either a learning disability, autism or physical health needs, but there's definitely an overlap, and we have got participation from the care leavers managers for the review.
Mr. King.
Yeah, Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I just clarify, Mr. Bulls, what capacity is he attending the meeting as? Could you just clarify that for us?
Yes, of
He's
course.
chairman of children. I didn't know that, so
Yeah.
that's just helpful.
You're welcome. Sorry.
Okay, that's no worries. It would have been helpful to just have that pointed out. Yeah, so thanks, Chair. Grateful to see that the lead members are here. I mean, hopefully they're not going to be changed in a couple of 3 months again. Always helps. But you know, for getting up to speed with things. So what I've got a few queries about this report. So thank you for the officers, and thank you for clarifying that they essentially what I understood you to say earlier in answer to the questions being asked is that this is going to be implemented once you finish this work, and it's going to be implemented therefore straight away from what I understood. What I've not got an idea is how many children are actually involved in this review, how many, totality, because this is looking at, I assume it's just disabled and children with disabilities and learning disabilities, not all children across, not entirely clear from what this, but just to look at in the background, the aim of the SIPFAR talks about a number of, what you're trying to establish, etc. And this may have been covered in previous reports about whether existing models were fit for purpose, but I don't see a conclusion anywhere in any of the report you've given us as to whether any of the objectives that are actually stated under paragraph 8 have actually been delivered against. But one of the things I've got a bit of a concern is when you talk about process mapping, you talk about looking at digital solutions. Well, not all disabled people, young people can access digital solutions. Some of them don't find that terribly easy to do, whether irrespective of whether they've got, what disability it is. So what's going to be done to address that and deal with that? I'm just going to go through the points I've got, and then maybe you can come to the rest of them. The other issue I've got, and I think this is quite important, but you did skirt around it. You talk about this has been it says in the report it's been identified as savings within the MTFS, but what you told us you can't identify what those savings are likely to be at the moment. Well, I do find that quite extraordinary this late on in the process, that you can't give us any idea of the anticipated savings that are likely to be generated by this, given that in a few weeks' time, you're talking about going from having completed the work to immediately start doing it. Now, I would have thought we need to understand what the savings are for doing this program, if any, because the assistant director just stated this is a very difficult thing to do. Well, if it's a very difficult thing to do and we're not going to generate substantial savings, then it might not actually be worth doing. But at the moment, none of us have got a clue because you haven't told us and we haven't got that information. I'm sure this is, you will be able to tell us at some point. And then finally, and I think this is something that does concern me and is probably going to concern all of us over the coming months, is the local government reorganisation. The government tells us it's going to happen. I know that the county council is looking at this and other councils are looking at this, but something like this, which is going to be starting in a few months' time, and is this going to be thrown off course? Is this actually going to be embedded in time and actually developed and work sufficiently well so that when LGR, whether we're split up into 2 or 3, who knows, the government will decide. But that's surely going to have a massive effect on a project like this and a program like this. So are we, by stint of not actually knowing what the future holds, running a huge risk by actually switching from what we're doing now to doing this, especially if we don't know what savings we're going to deliver and how effective it's going to be anyway. And that brings me back to my first question I was going to ask, and which again, I wasn't really clear about. You talked about maximising independence for young people, and that's great. However, a lot of young people, given that getting diagnosed with a neurodiverse condition is actually quite difficult and quite long-winded and takes a long time, don't necessarily come into this process until very late on in their teens, sometimes after 18, they come in at between 18 and 25. how is that going to be dealt with in this process? So that's the bit I can't understand from this, because you talk about from very small children, i.e. babies, through to adulthood, and that's great if they've got a very clear disability and it's very obvious from the get-go. But if it isn't, and it takes several years, much longer to understand that, how is this process going to deal and be able to manage with that, given that there are increasing numbers of people being diagnosed with neurodiverse conditions, as the government is wont to tell us, whether, whatever those conditions are. And I'm, again, goes back to what I said, how many children are involved in this, and what sorts of disabilities what groupings of disabilities are they? Are they physical and mental health, neurodiverse? I've got no information here to tell me that. So with respect, I think there's a lot of gaps here, and I appreciate the report, but for me, there's a lot of gaps here, and there's a lot of information that we need to have in order to fully understand whether this program is going to work or is not going to work, because at the moment I can't say with any certainty whether it's going to do what essentially it says it's going to you've set out to do. So sorry if that's but that's how I see it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. So quite a few points.
Indeed.
Points. Yeah. So try and take them what I can remember. So the cohorts of children and young people that we're looking at, as Claire kind of stated earlier on, it's those with learning disabilities, autism, physical and sensory impairments, those that we think would meet adult social care eligibility. So it's not going to be every young person. There's about, I think, as of 2025, I think it's about just over 7,000 young children with an EHCP. But it's nowhere near those levels. So a number of children have an EHCP. Doesn't mean they're all adult social care eligible moving forward. So the AD team already, so the young adults with disabilities team that we've already got established, they work with a number of children and young people to transition them through into adult services as and when they need to do that. So, but as a feel for numbers, have you got a kind of a feel for the number of people in that cohort, Claire?
As part of the work stream, we have done analysis on the number of young people. I can get that information sent over to you, because I wouldn't want to give you incorrect information, but off the top of my head, for the last 2 to 3 years, we've been looking at around 500 young people that have gone through the young adult disabilities team that have gone on to need a service. But if you'd allow me to send that information through so I can give you accurate information.
Yeah, I'd appreciate. I'm sure all colleagues on this committee and those who are attending would appreciate that information. Yeah. I'm sure you've done modelling, looking at the different permutations. That's what I'm talking about. That's the sort of information we ought to have been presented with today to tell us what does it look like.
Yeah,
because that's the bit I don't understand at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in terms of as Claire outlined, by mid-October, I guess the full business case as such will be, that's what we're aiming for, to give the financial savings, the structure needed, the infrastructure, how it's going to work in practice processes. So a lot of that works and it's going to be kind of in that report in mid-October. I don't know when it's coming back to scrutiny, if it is yet. Angie, looking at you, is it down to come back to scrutiny for a further update? Okay, that's fine. But I appreciate that. That's definitely a point. Your point around LGR, without going into a lot of detail around it, because I wouldn't know the massive amounts of detail. So we're doing quite a lot of work around establishing kind of like the different options, etc. This program, as such, it's still it's the right thing to do for young people. It's there to try and support young people to be as independent as possible. Us as a county council, that's our statutory duty. That's what we want to do. That's what we should do. I wouldn't want to wait for the outcome of the LGR and stop everything to then see what happens in a few years. From our perspective, it's we've got an adults directorate, we've got a children's directorate. We should be working together like now to make sure things happen. I get your point, but at the same time, you could in theory say that for every contract that we've got, that we're going to go for home care next week at cabinet. In theory, we should, if we adopted that principle, it's don't do that and wait till LGR sorted itself out. But we have to do the right thing for people in adult social care. That's just my response. I understand the point, but
I wasn't saying not do it. I'm just wondering what risk assessment's being carried out to understand the risk that's been run and what happens if scenario A, scenario B, scenario C happens. Where does that then leave a service like this, which by definition you're just about to commence? It's very difficult. You just said that earlier. It's going to be very complicated and it's going to take time to bed in, etc., etc. So therefore, if it all then it had to be then, shall I put it, split up 2 or 3 ways for the sake of discussion, right? Depending on what the outcome is, where does that then leave services like this? Or we're just going to have to take it as we find it when we get to that point, if we get to that point, because who knows exactly what's going to happen because no decision's been made. But there are obviously risks with services like this at the moment, and not this one, not just this one, all of them, because there's a lot of unknowns at the moment about what the likely structure is going to be. So I wasn't saying don't do it. I'm just wondering how we're mitigating that risk. If you could answer that at all.
I
can't. I don't know.
Probably can't answer that, to be honest, because it's like you said, I think you've acknowledged that it's a risk to every single service that we provide, probably as a council, actually, away from adult social care and children's social care. So, that work is ongoing around looking at the different options, etc. But I wouldn't say, I'm not going to sit here and say no, we haven't done a risk assessment on each of the options for this service. But there is ongoing work around the whole of the council services.
Sorry, would you like me to pick up on you talked about the digital solutions as well?
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to offer some clarity. When I was talking about digital solutions, I was talking about digital solutions to identifying the correct cohort of young people that need to transition from children's to adult services. It wasn't an expectation that we were asking young people who are transitioning to use a digital platform to identify themselves. Sorry if that wasn't clear in the report.
That's great. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Some good points there, but I think we can honestly say it's going to be business as usual until the LGR egg is laid. I have now a question from Mrs. Broadley.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the report and I agree. It is business as usual. We've got to carry on. And if this helps even one person, it's worth it. The savings, if we're helping young people, then the first priority shouldn't be what savings we make. We're offering a service and that's what should be centre to it. You mentioned people with learning disabilities and getting them ready for transitioning into adulthood. What age are you planning on starting that? I worked with learning disabilities for many, many years, and the earlier that you start with trying to get a child independent, the better. So, I mean, you mentioned 14, but I don't know whether that was in relation to the learning disabilities. So I'd just like to understand when you're going to start with that transitioning to make them as independent as possible. And also, there are children with learning disabilities that don't actually attend a day service or whatever. They're purely in the home setting. And parents can be quite protective of their child. And, they're there until, unfortunately, maybe the parents get too old to be able to continue to look after that child. So the child has not had the experience of being independent. How are you going to address that? Thank you.
So preparation for adulthood, we recognise should start at 14. So we talk about the age of 14 through the report. preparation for adulthood should start really from as early as possible, but for the purposes of from a children and family and an adult social care perspective, we would look at from the age of 14, so that professionals who are involved in that young person's life are starting to prepare the young person, their parent carer, for that young person preparing for adulthood. The young adult disabilities team will become more actively involved from the age of 16 currently, and we aim to allocate those young people with the most complex needs at 17. And what we aim to do is to work collaboratively with the children and family services and adult services, so that we've got that collaborative pathway for a young person moving through into adulthood. But it would be our expectation that we're starting at 14.
Mrs. Broadley, I'm taking that you think that's too late sometimes.
Gotcha. Yes, I do. If you're going to try and make a child as independent as possible, if you take the basics of being able to get dressed, of being able to wash yourself, 14 seems to be rather old for that. Not all children with a learning disability will be able to achieve that, and I accept that. But I know from experience that the younger you start preparing them to do even the basics, which obviously then follows on into adulthood, it is key. At 14, you can't really, to get a child that's never had to dress itself or never had to wash itself, to start to get them ready for adulthood at 14 and say, right, to be as independent as you can, we're going to do this, this and this. To me, it just feels a little bit, I think it needs to start earlier, not necessarily all the things for independent living or whatever, but to make that child as independent as possible and then carry on with the rest. But at 14 just seems a little bit old for me. Sorry.
I think, preparation for adulthood, I think this report's really focused on the social care element, and we've got to remember that, schools, for example, parents, carers, people that were involved in that young person's lives are starting that journey much earlier. So, as children start school, they're starting to learn those independent skills. But this report really is focusing on the adult social care and the children's social care element of it, which is from 14. So I do take on board what you're saying. Teaching somebody to do some basic personal care routines at 14 is too late, but we've got to look at the broader concept, I think, of independence and enablement that does happen much earlier, like I say, within school settings and other settings that young people may attend.
Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I fully support this report. I think just to build on what you've just said I think it's the transition from childhood to adulthood that's important, and how we smooth that out. I've got 2 or 3 questions. The first one is, I think this was commissioned or started back in March 2023. There was a recommendation to look at this. I'm just wondering why it's taking 3 years to come to fruition. And I guess just to build on Mr. King's point, if we're now 2.5 years down the line and don't know savings, why did we? What was the impetus to start this project? And I guess one of them was to make sure that we're transitioning better. But the savings, I guess, taking Mr. King's point, I guess were identified earlier, or how was that taken into consideration? I also just want to talk about, I think it's point 33, identify potential efficiencies. And it suggests that we're missing out on some contributions because we're not transitioning from childcare through to adult care properly, and that we miss out on some contributions. Could you give us an idea of what that actually means? And then the third point is, and it's really just just to say that the parent carer engagement section is fantastic, and I hope I really hope that you take on board what the parents and carers have advised, because some of the suggestions in there are absolutely spot on. I understand what they're saying.
I'll cover a couple of points, Mr. Innes, hand over to Claire. I think you're right. Your last point around engagement with parents and carers. So for us, and I've worked at a number of authorities, and the parent carer forum and the parent carer engagement groups are always, you know, feet on the ground, know what's going on. Definitely the people to listen to, have the life experience, and for us to have that interaction and kind of dialogue with them is the first point, really. And we do the same in adults, for adults, adult carers as well. But we do know that parent carers are, you know, a very important group. So yes, absolutely. Your point around this was identified in March 23, and it's taken so long. I think that's a fair point. A lot of work's gone into this, and we've had a bit of a change of direction with our assistant director leadership teams as well. It's a bit of change there. The Santot's come in, Claire's come in as well, to give that a different impetus. We've got interaction with the ICB, which is an interesting one as well. So I think, Claire, can correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, like some of those contributions are linked to the, you know, the statutory responsibilities that health should fund as well as part of the packages for some people. So sometimes we are missing out on those across children, then go into adulthood as well. But yeah, I think, and the savings piece, there's a lot of financial modelling that's gone into, as you can appreciate, you know, we don't start a piece of work without doing that financial modelling. So a lot of financial modelling has gone into this. I believe that's been kind of finalised, concluded very shortly. There was a figure that I think we've internally had in mind around what we could potentially save. I wouldn't want to quote that today, because I wouldn't want to say that, because I don't know if I can say that. But until that's finalised in the MTFS, I think then we're ready to put that to the table. It like you said before, Mr. Innes, it is the right thing to do for children. The transition is it's the right place to get that pathway right, is the right thing to do. It should create a saving and efficiency, because my motto is do the right thing for the person and the efficiency will follow. If you don't do the right thing, you're going to be wasting money, wasting resource, doing the wrong things here. You're wasting loads of energy here. Do the right thing first, get your efficiency. That needs to be finalised and modelled up. I appreciate it's not in the papers today, but it will be in the final business case.
Thank you, Indy. Mr. Rupkin?
Sorry, Chair, Mr. Cook. Okay. Thank you, Chair. My question was actually answered within the questions asked by my colleague and answered, so I'll withdraw that question. Thank you.
Thank you. The report is an update for us to note. Mr. King's asked for additional information that will be distributed to all attending. The committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Agreed? Right. Thank you, Mr. Bors, Mrs. Danks and Mrs. Taylor for attending the meeting. You're welcome to stay in the public gallery for the remainder of the meeting if you wish.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, item 9 is the performance report for Q1 2025-26, April to June. And it's at pages 21 to 34 of the agenda pack. Inderjit Lahal, Assistant Director, will introduce the report and hand over to Matt Williams, Service Development and Business Partner. Indy, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as detailed, this is Q1 performance for 25-26 year, so it's April to June. The report structured to identify the key performance indicators that we've got across the directorate, and that's the whole directorate, so it includes adult social care, culture Leicestershire, and also adult learning to a certain extent. It's based around a number of national benchmarking and a number of local indicators as well. And the way that it's structured is around our adults and community strategy, which is around prevent, reduce, delay and meet needs. So that's how the report is structured around the table. So I'll hand over to Matt for a bit of commentary on the report.
Thanks, Andy, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, this is the first performance report of the reporting year 2025-26, and it covers quarter one, which is April to June of that period. I won't go through every paragraph due to, again, that would be quite some time, but I'll pick out some of the key points and then happy to take questions thereafter. So I'll start with adult social care side and paragraph 7. This just looks at the number of contacts coming into the authority, and for that period, April to June 2025, number of contacts were just slightly down on where they were for the equivalent 3-month period of the previous year. That was 7.7% down. That paragraph also notes the numbers coming in from health, from across the health spectrum, not just hospitals, but across all health. Those numbers have steadied somewhat. We know they have been increasing over previous years. At this stage, they have steadied over this last quarter. Moving on through the report, perhaps pick up on paragraph 9, and this looks at people awaiting allocation. At the end of June, at the end of that first quarter, there were 599 people awaiting. That's down 73 from 672 at the end of the previous quarter. We also look there at those that are awaiting more than 6 months, and that was down from 61 at the end of March down to 50 at the end of June, at the end of that first quarter. Paragraphs 10 and 11 pick up on the reablement service in the department, and there are two national metrics that pick up on reablement, that monitor reablement, and these are part of the Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework, the ASCOFs for short, which we touched on perhaps in my report last quarter, but these two metrics are quite key as part of that framework. The first of those looks at people who've been through reablement services and have no need for ongoing services following that. At the end of the first quarter, or during the first quarter, 83% of people had no need for services following reablement. This is slightly down on the 3 months previous in the previous year, that was 89%, but remains higher than a national average of 79%. There is a second indicator around reablement, and that's looking at people who live at home 91 days or 3 months following a hospital discharge into reablement. And it's a similar picture. We had 88% of people who were living at home 3 months later. That is slightly down on where we were this time last year. That was 91%, so a small reduction. But again, we remain much higher than the national average, which was 83.8% in the last average we've got. Bear in mind that is 2023-24. We don't yet have 24-25 national figures. Paragraph 12. This is the metric that looks into avoiding permanent placements into residential and nursing care. So unlike other indicators, what we're looking for here is a smaller number to try and reduce that number. And there are two metrics, one's for 18 to 64-year-olds and one's for 65 and over. For that younger age group, there were 15 admissions during the first quarter, and we do a forecast, and we're looking at around about 62 for the full year. So that's April 25 through to March 26. That'll be slightly fewer perhaps than 64 that we had last year. For those aged 65 or over, we had 212 admissions during the first quarter. And for that, we're getting a forecast of around about 881 for that full year. That's somewhat lower than 923 that we reported for 24-25. It's important there just to probably pick up on that final sentence in paragraph 12 that talks about these being early forecasts. They are only after 3 months, so we just have to bear that in mind. I will pick up statutory surveys next. That's on paragraph 14. Not a lot of detail in the paragraph in this time's report. I did provide quite a lot more detail in the June report. I've kept it in there just to for information in the sense that this biennial carers survey, those questionnaires go out in October, so next month. So that's for information there. We will do the usual adult social care survey as well, and those questionnaires go out in January. Paragraphs 15 and 16 both pick up on safeguarding, and the first of those paragraphs notes the large increase in alerts that we've had when we compare our first quarter of this year compared to last year. And this is probably still reflecting the initiative to raise safeguarding awareness amongst organisations and external partners. That kind of took place during the autumn winter, and where we did see an increase because of it. The numbers since have started to steady, so we're still comparing ourselves to pre that initiative in a sense, hence the reason you're getting that large increase. And that follows through really on paragraph 16, where we're showing an increase in the number of inquiries taking place. Again, part of that is off the back of the fact that we have an increase in our contacts coming through. Finally, within the adult social care section, on paragraph 17, we look at annual reviews. There's some background to those in the actual report itself. But at the end of the first quarter, 77% of people who had had a service for 12 months or more have had their annual review. This is very similar to the previous year at 77%, and again remains somewhat higher than the national average at 58.8%. I'll move on then onto the second half of the report, and that's picking up Culture Leicestershire. And paragraph 19, this highlights how there were 41,000 visits to our heritage sites during April to June. And this is broadly in line with the quarter one milestone of 41,590 to be precise. So unlike social care, where there's a strong outcomes framework that I've mentioned, and therefore we can use national data to benchmark and find where we fit. Not quite necessarily the situation across Culture Leicestershire. So what we do is we set annual targets, and for those targets we break them down into monthly milestones in order to understand whether we're on track to meet that target. So for, as I said, for those visits to heritage sites, we had a milestone for the end of June of 41,000, just over, and our figure for that quarter was actually 41,000, so just about in line. It's a similar position with our library services, which is picked up in paragraph 20. So we know that we had 196,000 physical visits to our county council managed libraries, and that was above the milestone for that period, which was 195,000. And I think the other point I just pick up there within paragraph 20 is this continued uptake of e-loans. I do tend to mention this quite a bit at Scrutiny Commission. We do wonder whether this will actually at some point stabilise. But at the moment, there were 322,000 during April to June, and that was 43,000 more than that equivalent period of last year. I'll finally just pick up on paragraph 22, and that is the volunteering that takes place within libraries, museums and heritage services. Between April and June of this year, we had 6,500 hours, and that was 890 more than the same period of last year, which was 5,630. And then finally, just with the adult learning service, this is an academic year, so it's not really strictly on that April to March period. But at the end of June, we were looking about 85% of people meeting their learning needs, slightly lower than the precision the previous year. By 1 percentage point, that was 85.8%. The report then goes on to conclude and summarise what I've just been through. So happy to leave it there, Chair, and take any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Abbott, is there anything you wish to add on this item?
Yeah, I mean, looking at them figures, it's very positive. Obviously, we've got a rich history in Leicestershire with the battlegrounds and everything, and I think that's heading all in the right direction, to be honest with you. Particularly the libraries as well. It's nice to see more people using libraries, actually physically thumbing through a book and actually, you know, learning and finding out about things. So yeah, it's all positive as far as I can see.
And Mr. Crook, is there anything you wish to add on this item?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from any of the members? Mr. King?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So we did raise this in the pre-meeting briefing, but yeah, thanks very much for your presentation. However, I think what would be really helpful is if we could look at a different way or additional ways this information could be presented. So if we just take the first one in adult social care, you say that the similar quarter, the first quarter of 25-26, 7.7% reduction in the number of people contacting the council. So what I'm not clear from that is whether that's a long-term trend over 2-3 years, and just picking up the bit of a discussion from the previous item. So if that's a long-term trend and going downwards, or is that just something that's cyclic, which happens once a year, goes down, and then it comes back up again because it comes up again in the winter. So I'm not clear about this from this. But that's really important, because if we're talking about planning services, looking at where we can make, see, we're not part of the administration, but the administration's got to make savings, quite substantial ones. We've obviously got to examine those as well, those proposals. The only way we can do that is if obviously demand is less, then obviously you don't perhaps need as many people. But then the question then is this a sustainable reduction in demand, or is this something that's, as I say, if it just goes up and down a bit, that's a different thing. So I think that's really important we understand that, and I could apply that to all the other things as well. I think there is, and it's helpful, but also some people picking out the information from the words, it's not terribly. I know you've got the other thing with the kind of whether it's up or down and all that sort of stuff, but that's just looking again at the same sort of level of reporting, looking at this time last year rather than, or where are we? And I appreciate COVID as an effect, because you still, some of the data from 3 years ago would be affected by that. But 2-3 years, is it, what's the long-term trend? That's basically what I'm saying. And I think there's a number of issues here where it isn't terribly clear. The second point I wanted to raise about is in paragraph 9, you talk about waiting for an assessment, and I appreciate that's not part of your brief. But the question I raised, Chair, is what is our target for someone who requests an assessment? And presumably this is adults who are requesting. So if someone requests an assessment, how long are we supposed to take? I'm afraid I haven't got that information in my mindset of how long we're allowed to take. But it does seem to me that if someone's waiting for 6 months or over, that's an incredibly long period of time, given that they may have a lot of chaos going on in their life at that particular time, to wait for an adult social care assessment. But again, I don't know how many assessments we've actually completed. So 600 out of, is it 6,000, 10,000? I've got no idea how many we've done, because again, it doesn't tell us this. So again, it's contextual. I've got no contextual information to understand, is 599 people waiting a big number? It is a lot of people, but is it a lot of people given the volume of what we're doing in totality? This is the bit it isn't clear. So I think that's the sort of thing I'd be looking for. I'm sure other colleagues have got other points, so I'm not going to go on too much about it. In terms of the culture in Leicestershire, I mean, again, it's useful, but I'm not really. The thing is, everything's lumped together. So when you talk about the heritage sites, and something was just mentioned about that, about it looks good. Well, yes, but which ones are doing well? Which ones are doing less well? And obviously, we've had a long history with, certain facilities that the county council owns, and it's so therefore how are they all individually performing versus the totality? That's basically what I wanted to get at, and yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
I won't respond to the individual ones, Mr. King, but Matt will cover those. But going back to your point around, is there a different way we can present the information at quarterly updates? I think for some areas it is more doable than others. So your point around the individual heritage sites, for argument's sake, potentially we can have more detail in the reports around individual areas. It would then make the report, if you think about it, if you're going into a lot of detail in a lot of the areas, the report would like mammoth essentially. So we do try and bring it all into one area, but I don't know whether committee would benefit from
if I may, Chair, just come back on that. Well, just taking that example, I mean, what have we got? 5 sites. So that's 5 lines on a graph. Okay, that's not a mammoth section of report. It's just showing as well, you know, are they all going the same way? Is the one that's not performing very well? Is the one where it went down all of a sudden? That could be because it was closed for a period of time, or I don't know. But this doesn't tell us that, so we don't know. We're just having to accept that, you know, all of those facilities are doing very well. Well, that could be hiding a multitude of sins, which we don't know from the way this information is being presented. That's my point. Thank you, Chair.
That's a fair point, Mr. King. I think maybe there's something in a future session where we do have a bit of a whether it's a specific scrutiny session on performance, potentially where we go into more detail on some of those areas or on the areas. Yeah, that's something we can certainly consider and have a talk to Mrs. Knight around how she wants to do that.
Got online, we've got Mr. Bayani. Hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Kash Bayani, Health Watch Advisory Board. I'm sorry I can't be there in person either. I've had dental treatment and feeling quite groggy, to be honest. Don't know how long it can sustain. We had a question about paragraph 9 also on waiting for assessment. What's the reason behind the drop in numbers waiting? And have they actually been assessed, or have they dropped out of the system for one reason or another? And while I'm at it, if I can ask about another paragraph 15, the 88% rise in safeguarding reports. Reports suggest that it may be down to greater awareness. Can we confirm sort of what sort of work is being done to understand this increase?
Thank you. The drop in numbers in weights on paragraph 9, did we say? Yeah, this is work going on within the department, and it certainly has increased the number of assessments being completed. That is, in fact, so these are people awaiting allocation to a social worker. It may not always be for an assessment. That is a nuance of the data. That these people aren't necessarily waiting an assessment. They may be waiting as part of a broader piece of work and other organisations and partners' involvement. But we have seen an increase in assessments in relation to that reduction there in the number of people waiting. That is something that is happening. In terms of the safeguarding question with regards to the 88% increase, that, as I said in the report, is down to this initiative potentially. We are seeing numbers stabilise now in those contacts. They reached a peak at around about February this year, and subsequent to that, those numbers are stabilised now. So that is reflecting, as I said, that autumn-winter piece of work of increasing that awareness amongst our partners. That number is now steady, and I suppose that, in a way, could go back to Mr. King's point of perhaps not knowing that level of context within the detail in the report.
Oh, thank you, Chair.
Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to back up what Mr. King was saying, and perhaps as a recommendation, we, as a Scrutiny Commissioner, should take this to the Scrutiny Commission, because I think this isn't unique to this committee. I think there are a lot of reports that could utilise a lot better visual information. So just agreeing with what Mr. King's saying.
Thank you, Mr. Innes. Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I remember what Mr. King said. I got my brain cell kicked in finally, and I had a quick squint at the public health stuff. And in the 4th of June agenda, we had a report on health performance, and the public health prevention indicators in Leicestershire from our own public health department include little graphy things showing you the trend over time. And it's even colour-coded to say when it's getting better or worse. And they rag rate it the whole lot. And that actually answers a load of your questions. How were we looking over time? Because that is a valid point. It's very useful to know that. So I suggest you have a look at that, because I find it's a good way of doing it. It deals with a number of those questions. You'd have to fiddle around with it to put the information you've got in, but I'm sure it's not beyond the wit of man. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's... Oh, Mrs. Page.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question on page 23, paragraph 16. It states that between April and June, there were 308 inquiries, a notable increase of 232 on safeguarding. But then later on, it said during the first quarter, 94.4, 234 out of 438 of inquiries involved and identified risk being reduced or removed. Now, could you talk me around that a little bit? Were there reports because for the sake of reporting and then found that they were not valid, or were they actually is it worth blowing the trumpet of the department because they actually identified and dealt really successfully with those risks and handed them over? Because I think that's really, really worth knowing. And my other little point is personal waffle, page 24.20. And it states the local authorities encourage the use of libraries as they promote free and equal access and blah, blah, blah. Now, I have got a library in Lutterworth, and it is state of the art, and it has always been quite well used. Reason for that, it is because the people who manage that library have always taken an interest in getting involved, say, if there is a light switch on at Christmas by opening the library. We've got the Wrigley Readers. We used to use it more so as a community hub. So once you use a library and promote it as a community hub for coffees, for getting children in, for holding events, but ever since it's become one of those click and do your book, you know, not having the stuff in there, it hasn't got the same kind of appeal anymore. So and the involvement of the library and the community hasn't been that high. Also, I find that, for instance, in South Leicestershire, we have no media whatsoever. We've got no paper, we've got no means of communicating except for one advert. Local flash, it's called. We used to have little adverts in there. You know, we've got Wrigley Readers, we've got this and that, because a lot of people don't go on Facebook, or they don't sit there and go, oh, today I'm going to see what's on the county council website. People don't do that. They're too busy. So it's just a point of information, really, to highlight our libraries a little bit more in the community and get more involved in the community as they used to, because that enhances the uptake of the library as a community hub. And that is what they originally did very, very well. And I think that will take up, or the uptake of taking books of the younger ones out again, because that was always something we were really good at. Thank you. That's just a waffle.
Thank you, Mrs. Page.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. They're useful. If I just pick up on the safeguarding ones, which are related to paragraph 16, I think you're talking about the kind of the latter part of that paragraph and the outcomes where we're reducing 95% or removing 95% of risk. At this stage, I don't really say a great deal more beyond that, which in a sense goes against some of the conversations we've had this afternoon about context. The reason behind that is national figures aren't yet published. This is a new angle on looking at safeguarding. We should have had figures in February. They're not been released yet. So when I get those, if I do find Leicestershire are either way, either struggling at 94% or perhaps doing better than the national average, I'll definitely bring in those figures into this so you can get an understanding of where we are. But for now, it is just a bit of a play
the
figure.
reason for. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Recommendation, the report is an update for us to note. The committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Agreed? Move on to Agenda item 10, we have the Adult Social Care Statutory Complaints and Compliments Annual Report 2024-25 at pages 35 to 52 on the agenda. Indigit will introduce this item and he is supported by Alicia Lanham, Head of Business Services. Indigit, if you go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual statutory complaints and compliments report for 24-25 across adult social care. As highlighted, Alicia is here to present the report to go through some of the key points. The actual report is on pages 39 to 52, the actual main report. But Alicia, if you can hand over to yourself for some key points.
Very much. Good afternoon. Okay, so this report presents the Adult Social Care Statutory Complaints and Compliments Annual Report for the period 1st of April 24 to the 31st of March 25 and has been prepared by the Complaints and Information Services Manager. Committee is asked to note the contents of the report and are invited to make comments. As you'll be aware, the Council manages and coordinates complaints using one of three policies, and the subject matter of this report is complaints managed under the Adult Social Care Complaints Policy. Complaints and compliments about all other aspects of adults and communities departments are reported separately as part of the Corporate Complaints Annual Report. So I'll just start by summarising some of the background in the cover report, and then I'll move to the main annual report itself. So if I can just ask you to turn your attention to paragraphs 4 through to 10, where I'll just give a quick summary. So the Adults and Communities Department is contacted on a daily basis by service users, carers and other interested parties to share their concerns, requests, information or to seek clarity on care arrangements. These queries are dealt with and resolved at local level within the care teams or through the directorate without recourse to the formal complaints process. The complaints team does on occasion also receive queries, concerns that suggest an adult requires immediate support, and these requests are best handled outside of the formal complaints process and are referred to the most appropriate areas such as the CAC or within the directorate itself. So eligible social care complaints will be managed under a statutory process, which our local policy follows. The local authority social services and national health service complaints regs require all responsibilities to make arrangements for handling complaints and consideration of those complaints in accordance with the regulations, and that those regs also place a duty upon the local authority to prepare an annual report, which is what I'm presenting today. Those regulations provide a framework for those handling complaints relating to a local authority's social care functions, including directly provided services and commissioned services. And you can find more information in terms of procedures for handling complaints regarding social care providers within regulations. People who are paying for their own social care, referred to as self-funders, may complain to the local authority, for example, about the assessment process or there's been a failure to assess services people have arranged or purchased themselves, not covered, but the local authority may be challenged if those are commissioned for those individuals. If I could now ask the committee to turn their attention to the main annual report, working from page 5 onwards. So just looking at paragraph 3.1, complaint volume. So positively, you can see that complaint volumes decreased in the year 24-25 compared to the previous year. So that's down from 369 to 317. This is a reduction of 52, which equates to approximately 14%. Moving to paragraph 3.2, complaints by theme. As you can see, for 24-25, charging was the highest category. And these complaints mostly related to poor communication, disputing of invoices and charges and delays in completing assessments. Care assistance have seen an increase, and the main themes to these are again about delays in communication. And then positively, care planning has seen a sizable decrease, which reflects the continued good work and the learning from complaints that's happening in the department. In terms of paragraph 3.3, the primary cause of complaints, so you'll note there that the quality of work remains the most frequently identified topic. This category does include the quality of home and residential care. And then positively, we've seen approximately 35% reduction in complaints relating to customer care and conduct. Looking at 3.4 joint complaints, the regulations does place a duty on local authorities to work together with health partners in responding jointly to complaints. And during the year 24 to 25, one complaint was considered using the joint complaints protocol. Just moving to 3.5 compliments. Obviously, whilst the report understandably does focus on complaints, the adult social care area did receive 278 compliments during the year, and a selection can be found at Appendix A. And this adds balance to the annual report and recognises the good work that is also taking place across the department. Just looking at paragraph 4.1, responsiveness to complaints. So just looking at stage 1, which is the first stage in the local policy. Response times to stage 1 cases remain steady, 65 responded to within 20 days and 92 within 40. And then looking at stage 2, so this is where complainants choose to have their stage 1 escalated in stage 2. So we had 38 complaints requested that escalation, which then goes forward for a review by a senior manager. This was an increase of 9 from the previous year, and that is a correction. Just to note, that's a correction what's covered in the cover report of 44, it's 29. 51% of stage 2 cases were responded to within 20 working days, which is obviously down from the previous year, which is 20%. Paragraph 4.2, complaint outcomes. So you'll see from paragraph 6, the annual report shows that 42% of the complaints were upheld. Again, please note this is just a correction from the paragraph 12 in the cover report. And positively, this is a slight decrease from the previous year where it's set at 50%. Paragraph 5, learning from complaints. Obviously, we know that it's a valuable source of information which can help us to identify recurring or underlying issues and areas for improvement. And you'll see in the report that information is provided about learning and the corrective action that has taken place. And there are examples in there talking about refresher training on specific subjects and financial redress as well. Moving on to paragraph 6, which is about the local government ombudsman. So should a complainant remain dissatisfied following internal consideration of their complaint, they may take it to the local government and social care ombudsman to seek independent investigation. In 24-25, the LGO investigated 20 cases. This compares to 23 in the previous year in 23-24. The Ombudsman published final decisions on those 20 complaints, and fault was found in 12. In cases where fault was found, these mainly related to delays in completing a financial assessment or failure to meet care needs. The Ombudsman does monitor remedies carried out by the Council where fault has been found and where they've proposed remedial actions, and failure to carry out those remedies within the agreed timeframes can be recorded as non-compliance. And cases that raise serious concerns, highlight matters of public interest or cases of non-compliance can lead to the LDO issuing a public report. And I'm pleased to say that in 24-25, there were no public reports issued and we had 100% compliance rating. I will conclude the presentation there, Chair, and await comments and questions. Mr. Abbott, is there anything you would wish to add on this item?
Not at this present.
Yeah. We've got a question from Mrs. Broadsley.
Not so much of a question, but a complaint, would you believe? Item 8. The Adult and Communities Department is contacted on a daily basis by service users, carers and other interested parties to share concerns, request information, seek clarification. 2.5 years ago, my 38-year-old daughter was diagnosed with a brain tumour. We don't get the care through social services. Because of a misdiagnosis, she gets care through health. What we do get through care, through social services, is a ceiling hoist and a profile bed, things like that. Obviously, we've worked in the last 2.5 years extensively with her, with physio and everything, to try and get her, because she was paralysed down the left side, to get her up on her feet again, which we're just about there. So on Wednesday last week, I decided to contact social services, as Mr. Wilson told me to the last time, via your customer service. When you go on, there is no option for adult social care. Children and families, waste, also highways, nothing for adult social care. So I thought, well, I'll go on children and families then, it's family. No, it was nothing to do with that sort of thing. So I redialed. Couldn't go anywhere with it, but I pressed an option at the end to speak to somebody. After an hour, just over an hour, I eventually put the phone down because nobody was answering. I was in a queue, nobody was there. I tried again later that day, thinking, you know, it was a busy time, maybe I'll try again. Because the reason for my call was to have the ceiling hoist taken out, to sort out a stair lift, a shower chair, that type. So I'm not asking for care. I'm asking for the things that you provide to be changed or to be reassessed to have these. But as I say, rang again. I had another 3/4 of an hour on the phone with no resolve. All it keeps doing is pushing you to fill in forms, to go online. I am capable of going online, although I have to say, when it got to the point of asking me what her lower leg measurement was and what her height and her weight is and everything, that I gave up. But I can go online. My mother's 95. She wouldn't have a clue about going online. When I went online to get the number for adult social care, it gave me this one, which adult social care is not on it. You know, they gave you the customer service, adult social care is not on it. And the reason I brought it under the complaints thing is, if I had so much difficulty, and the only way I got round it was I have a niece who works for Leicestershire County Council, nothing to do with adult social care, but managed to get a message through to them for them to ring me. I managed to do that because I knew somebody. The average person out there doesn't. And although we've got these complaints here, I wonder how many other people like me don't, you know, that don't have, I mean, I've got a voice being able to come here, but they don't have the voice to be able to say how frustrating. I mean, by the end of the day, there was steam coming out. I was really so frustrated. And there are a lot of elderly people want different items or different things or information from adult social care. Something has got to be done to make it easier for people to get in touch with somebody. Just somebody speaking at the end of a phone would be absolutely fantastic. Instead of, if you're not, if you can't do this, go online, fill in this form. You know, as I say, my mother couldn't do that. There's a lot of elderly people that don't have experience of online that couldn't do that. And I just think that we as a department need to look at it and need to look at it seriously, because as I say, steam was coming out of my ears. So frustrating. And then there must be lots of others like me. Thank you. Mr. Cook.
I echo the lady's concerns, and obviously she's an expert in a real life situation there. And I'm sure it's not unique, and it's sad to hear. When we sit here, and it's a great presentation, but when we sit here looking at these facts and figures, surely that what the lady says, having a human at the other end of the phone, is common sense. As I say, there must be thousands of those calls that are made, and no one gets anywhere with it. Do we not have a suggestion of, say, a callback system like some companies do or doctors do, where if you're hanging on so long that you get a call back, a promised call back, it must be so frustrating. And then the rest of your day is ruined by that situation. And you're trying to deal with a real life situation, which I'm sure you appreciate. But when we sit here, the reality is that is the reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook and Mrs. Boardley. Totally from what you said. I think we've heard that on some occasions around the frustration that people are having around contacting adult social care. So it's something I will definitely take back to the team lead on that. But it is something, the callback methodology you spoke around, Mr. Cook, that is something we've looked at and considered. I think there's something that needs to be done around actually contacting people, having that communication line. I think, you know, from what you said, and I totally agree that just even if someone just speaks to you and says, look, it's being dealt with, or actually it's not being dealt with, but you know, it's in situ, that's something that we can pick up. I think just on Alyssa's presentation, the complaints that are going through this report are those that go through the formal complaints process. So those complaints or those issues that people are having at contact point, you know, they're issues that people would potentially raise with us as officers. But if they're not raising it through the formal complaints process, it won't form part of that report and those numbers.
I accept what you're saying, but it is frustrating, even going online and trying to find a number for adult social care. I did find Bassett Street and I thought, oh, I'm in Wigston, brilliant. But nobody answers the phone. There is nothing. You know, I agree, yes, my day was totally ruined because I was so angry by the end of it, trying to do care for my daughter and my granddaughter and trying to get through on the phone and spending an hour. You know, that was an hour I could have been doing something else. It is extremely frustrating, and I accept your report and I understand what this report is about, and it's not. But this is the place. When it happened to me at the end of last week, I thought, Adults and Social Care Monday, I am going to mention this because I got the voice being here. But Mrs. White or Mrs. Brown or whoever doesn't have that voice to be able to say how frustrating it is. So please, I'm sorry if I've bored you all, but it's frustration. Thank you.
I think it's a very valid point that you're making. I think if you leave it with me, Mrs. Boardley, I'll speak personally with the head on this.
And the other thing is, I've been on they did ring me back today, but I'm on a waiting list.
Thank you, Mrs. Broadley. I'd just like to say this is just adult social care. I don't know what it's like on the other telephone lines, whether they get answered or not. Maybe we could do a broad spectrum look and see what the response times are on all the other links on the website, etc. Mr. Innes, you have a question?
I had a resident last week. He called me and said, could you get a council officer to phone me back, please? I've been going round a loop for an hour, 2 hours. I intervened and he was called back within 5 minutes. Ridiculous. But that wasn't the reason I wanted to talk. Complaint handling. So we've heard that this isn't analysis of all complaints, so general complaints from the public or whatever, or residents. This is more formal complaints. Do people really understand the stage 1, stage 2 processes of complaints? Because I've gone through it and it is very complex. So I'm not sure this is a fair analysis of how well we are doing. So that was the first thing. Second thing is the review of fault cases. Do we take those down to root cause? So do we understand what the cause of the fault cases are and put corrective actions in? And do we review non-fault complaints? Because that can be a learning. Although we can say we are not at fault, it's still a complaint. Somebody has felt frustrated about something and have decided to complain, do we actually take an analysis of the ones which are non-fault and actually learn from those as well?
Just to respond on your point about how well the residents feel that they understand the processes. So we do provide information on our website. We've got 3 policies that we use. We have the corporate complaints procedure, one for the statutory process for children, and then one for adults. So we provide that information on the website. Policies are uploaded, but I do acknowledge your point in terms of just how well they and maybe we can look into how we might try to understand that a little bit better. In terms of cases where fault has been found, so the service managers will review those cases just to ascertain what caused the fault, and then that information is what then is driving the corrective action. So some of what was mentioned in the report about training, etc., they would have looked at what caused the issue. And then for fault as well, they do get looked at as well.
Thanks, Chair. So the non-fault, is there actually reports on how they've been addressed, and do the complainants also get a response at the end to say? Often it can be, we don't accept this complaint, but it would be good if they understood that we've learned something from it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I can only talk broadly, but we do obviously provide the response to the individual. We might typically apologise for the issue or advise them of what action we're taking, those sorts of things. So it could be included.
Mrs. Page, got a question?
Thank you, Chairman. I hear Linda and, Councillor Innes, because we all get these constant complaints of people hanging onto the telephone, and it is not just for adult social care, it is also for other things, highways matters. And when you tell them report, they say, why should I? Because I'm hanging on the lines. Now, one of the things, and we are constantly getting told that this is cutting back in resources, and later on in future scrutiny, we will find that a lot of reports come in regards of implementing AI and further IT. And some of us who've been here for a few years, won't say how many, we have constantly, raised the point that IT isn't the messiah of everything, because there are the people who are stressed, there are the elderly, and I even struggle sometimes. And as I said earlier on, you don't just sit there and go, oh, whoops, let's see what's today. And I think there needs to be that option that accounts for something which isn't the norm, for the person to phone back and forever else. And I know it's been said so many times over the last 20 years, and all we ever keep saying is we've got to go and enhance IT, we've got to go with AI. And whilst I appreciate there is a need for IT and maybe enhancement, but not to the detriment of the personal touch, because at the end of the day, we are here because we are a service provider. They are our clients, they are our shareholders, and we get paid by the general public to provide those services. Now, there is every year, on the positive note, I've only said that because I'm supporting Linda here and I wasn't bored by what she said, because it had to be raised again somewhere. But every year we get the annual compendium report, which I think is always my Bible because it has got a great deal of information in that. And over the years, when we've looked at complaints as an authority, those complaints were always used as a basis to learn from, and then it was addressed. And I think maybe this report hasn't quite covered it, that we do actually learn from our mistakes, that managers then address it and feed it back. And I think, you know, you might want to elaborate on that. On the positive note, and that was actually what I only wanted to say, it is, yes, not everybody complains, even if they have a bad experience, but people complain. But not an awful lot of people actually phone through a compliment. And it is very few. When things are going right, people never phone through a compliment. And we always get stick, but very, very little do we get thanked for the good services this council actually provides. So when we are looking at the huge amount of service users we deal with, and when we are looking at all of the things we are doing right, the complaints which come through are actually relatively little. You can pick me up on this and say there shouldn't be any, but there always will be complaints. But I think what I'd like to finish my waffle with, it is paragraph 20 on page 37, where it says that actually 278 compliments have been received. And to me, that means a lot. And that means that there are an awful lot of satisfied people out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. If we could go to Mr. Bayani online, please, and then we'll follow with Mr. King.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've just got a second or third what others have said. Communication seems to be the area where lots of members of the public are complaining, and I hear obviously departments who can't offer everything that the public want, but I think sometimes that answering that phone is the it makes the whole thing easier. Anyway, let's give you something positive. So page 37 of this report, point 17, is saying that there's a total of 38 complaints were referred, etc. Reduction on the 23-24 figure. So I suppose that's a compliment in itself. Does the department know why there was a reduction and what can be learned from there?
So this is a reduction of those that were referred through to a senior manager for review during the year. I don't know if there's a direct response. I wouldn't know the reason for this. You do, Alyssa. I wouldn't know.
No, go away.
Mr. King?
Yeah, thanks. So really the main thing I wanted to raise about this was, it's kind of useful in some senses, but equally there's kind of gaps in information here. So what I'm not clear about is the rate of, so as Mrs. Page said, there'll always be complaints, but has the rate of complaining increased or decreased for however many users we have a year that interact with our services? That's the bit I'm not clear from this, which kind of, I suppose, what was just raised is kind of what's the reason for the number of complaints falling? Is that because the number of people interacting with us has decreased, or is that because, we've made improvements in a certain area and therefore people hadn't got need to complain about those issues anymore? The second thing that's not very clear to me is whether there's any, repeat complainers. People made more, because unfortunately, we do. I know you do get that, but this isn't clear. There's no reference to that here at all. So how many individuals are involved in making complaints? Because there could be, and it does say that sometimes complaints register in more than one area. Well, okay, that may be true. So how many are there people who make more than one complaint about a particular situation, because that might be the case, but then equally, are there people who make a complaint one month and then the following month they make another complaint and the following month, you know, and you get a serial complainer. So this doesn't, I don't understand that from here. So that's the kind of, you know, granular detail I would have liked to have seen. But you know, and obviously there are compliments as well, so that's great. Finally, the only thing I'm not very clear about is whether, when the ombudsman has determined certain complaints, there can be a financial penalty imposed against the county council, but it doesn't mention how much we've paid out in the last year, if at all. And I'd just be very grateful if we could have some clarity on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. I think what I'll do is I'll take your points away, if that's okay, and come back with that information. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your input. The committee is asked to note the Adult Social Care Complaints Annual Report, which we have done, and our comments will be recorded in the minutes and passed on to the Cabinet for consideration. Is that agreed? Agenda item 11 is the Leicestershire County Council Museum Policy Revision and Accreditation Report, pages 53 to 122 on the agenda. Indigit will introduce this item, and he is supported by Franny Wills, Head of Service for Communities and Wellbeing. Indigit, please go ahead.
Thank you again, Chair. I'm going to hand over straight to Franny, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. This report seeks to provide some context and background on the Museum Access Policy and Collections Development Policy, and invites comments from this committee on the revised policies which are contained in your report packs in Appendix B and Appendix D. The policies are key documents within the Museum Accreditation Standard, and the report also contains information about the accreditation standard itself. So I'll just briefly take you through the main points. Leicestershire County Council has 5 accredited museums. They're the 1620s House and Garden at Donington-le-Heath, Bosworth Battlefield Heritage Centre, Melton Carnegie Museum, Charnwood Museum, which we run in partnership with the Borough Council, and Harborough Museum, which we run in partnership with the District Council. The Museum Service supports the County Council's Great Community strategic outcome by helping to ensure that cultural and historic heritage and the natural environment are enjoyed and conserved. The 5 sites were last accredited in 2021, and our accreditation returns were required by the 1st of August 2025. We are seeking retention of our current full accredited status and expect to be notified of the outcome early in 2026. The accreditation scheme encompasses nationally agreed standards for UK museums. Attaining the standard demonstrates that a museum is professionally and ethically run. It also gives access to certain strands of funding, for example, National Portfolio Organisation from Arts Council England, which the County Council's museums are currently in receipt of. The standard covers all aspects of delivering a museum and is split into 3 principal areas: organisational health, managing collections, and users and their experiences. Further information on the standards is contained in your report. The current Museum Access Policy and the Collections Development Policy are due to expire in November 2025, and if the revised policies are approved, they will replace the current versions. The proposed revisions to both policies are minor and ensure that information and references are current. In terms of the Access Policy, as the name suggests, it sets out how our museums will ensure their spaces, collections, resources and activity is accessible, and that it is done in ways that are engaging and relevant and of high quality. The principal changes are that in Section 1, there is the inclusion of the service's vision statement, create space to spark imagination, celebrate communities and enhance well-being, which was adopted in 2024. This has also been added to the Collections Development Policy. In Section 4, the definition of terms, it's proposed to replace the term intellectual with cognitive as a more accurate description of the barrier that faces some audiences and recognises that not everyone thinks, learns and understands in the same way. In Section 6, the policy statements, these have been updated and include, for example, under physical access, a commitment to engaging in projects which enable people to access museum collections in their own home, such as a Culture to You service, which was launched in 2024. The policy statements are not intended to be an exhaustive list of all the ways access is provided, but to highlight those which are particularly relevant to the County Council's museums or new and developing areas of work that we will focus on over the life of this policy. Section 7 has been updated to reflect changes in legislation, national and local policy, for example, the 2023 update to the Equalities Act. The access policy has been reviewed by the Adults and Communities Departmental Equalities Group, who were supportive of the changes and did not identify any equalities concerns. The Collections Development Policy sets out how the Council's museums will collect, care for and make accessible the collections it holds. The formation of today's museum collections date back to the mid-19th century and have evolved over that time to create the rich resource that we have today, which reflects the communities, people and places of Leicestershire from the prehistoric period to the modern day. We recognise the privilege of holding these collections in trust for past, current and future generations of the people of Leicestershire. The service held a co-creation workshop on the policy with volunteers, people who have engaged with different aspects of the service and staff as part of the review process. The key comments from the workshop related to the focus for contemporary collecting and identified the themes of home and family life in section 4.3, cultural life, section 4.4, and working life, section 4.5 as areas for proactive collecting. Collections are primarily acquired as a result of donation. In exceptional circumstances and when external funding can be secured, items may be purchased, for example, if an item becomes available for acquisition through the Treasure Act. The Museum Service is the County Council's designated repository for any systematic archaeological fieldwork projects that are undertaken in the county, and this work is primarily generated through the planning process. As most collecting is a result of donation and therefore reactive, each collection theme within the policy has a focus for collecting over the next 5 years, and this will be used to inform project-based work which might create opportunities to more proactively fulfil these ambitions. The Collections Development Policy ensures that the service works in accordance with relevant legislation, and this is outlined in sections 8.3, 10.1, 11.2 and 13.1 of the policy, and they have been updated to include any amendments, for example, the 2023 update to the Treasure Act. Section 5 sets out how the museum collections are reviewed and the process for disposal. The outline plan for the review and rationalisation of collections for the next 5 years has been updated and is contained in section 5.7 of the policy. Relevant officers at Charnwood Borough Council and Harborough District Council have been consulted on the revised policies and have contributed towards the accreditation returns for these two museums. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge the work of officers across the service, in particular the Heritage Manager, which have enabled us to complete the returns for the 5 museums and for the support of our partners at Charnwood and Harborough Councils. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Mr. Crook, is there anything you wish to add to this item?
No, thank you, Chair.
Do we have any questions or comments from members? Mr. Chapman first, please.
Thank you. Right, this is bringing back now over the last 4 years, we're looking at collections. We have an issue, I believe, with some of our collection and where it's stored. Does that affect this accreditation at all? Because over the last 4 years, we've been talking about the storage of some of the museum items and everything else, and looking at finding the new building annex at the back here, which would directly affect our accreditation, I thought, going forward. Have we got any further forward with this? We've got 2 members of the cabinet actually sat here now. At some point, we know we have to do something with this. Is this moving forward, and will this affect this new accreditation going forward, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chapman, and you're quite right. I think there are 2 aspects in terms of storage, which we've talked about in terms of the wider collection. So we continue to have a challenge around the future collections of archival material. So that's separate to museum accreditation. So that's a separate accreditation process. So we're focusing on museums here. But you are quite right. We do have a challenge in some of the museum stores that we have as well. However, I'm pleased to say we have managed to make some progress over the last 4 years. So some of the storage facilities that we've identified as being substandard, we're in the process of moving out of. So that's positive. So we're hoping from that point of view that it won't negatively impact this application. But thank you for remembering.
I thank you for that. I'm glad it's not going to affect it. Thank you, Chair.
Mrs. Page.
Thank you, Chairman. Storage always has been one of my concerns because I can never get my head around it, how much we actually got and where it's all being kept. I know we've got a jolly great big coach somewhere and God knows where that is, and it probably is deteriorating somewhere. My concern within, and we're only dealing, I whinged about libraries and earlier on, so I'm not going to whinge, I'm just going to focus. And one of the things is that, for instance, on page 91, we are talking about the reserve collection. And I know from my previous history that that was always very well thought of because there are items which are being lent and hired out and whatever, and it goes to schools and exhibitions. But I really don't think the policy really does it justice. So I was wondering if you could talk me around it. So what about the damage? Is there any income? How are we dealing with that? And is there a policy that underpins if we are lending one of our valuable masterpieces to a school and it's being wrecked and ruined? How are we dealing with that? I mean, the policy doesn't really deal with that. The other point is 1.6, I think, page 83, and it was the process of acquiring items. Now, again, it doesn't tell me too much. So we've got so much stuff, we don't know where to put it, yet, you know, does that mean are we still acquiring stuff? And then it says the acquiring, it is the responsibility of the governing body. Well, who is the governing body? Because, you know, I would, and, you know, talk me around that. And then following on from that is the disposal of an item. And coming back to the point that, and I remember well going around all of the museums and all of the sites where we store things, and there is so much and sometimes not in the right conditions. So there must be quite a lot of deterioration in some of the stuff. But these things are all, well, the treasure of every single resident in Leicestershire. So who is responsible for the disposal and what is the underpinning policy? You know, can't just have somebody saying, well, you know, that coach is a jolly great big thing that is standing there. Let's just get, you know, get rid of it. So just talk me around that. And my concern is that when you have a policy, yes, sometimes you can't go into minutia because it ties you down too much. But here it doesn't give me anything, so anything can happen. Do I make sense? So there isn't enough detail. So is there anything else that underpins all of these items?
Okay, I'll try and respond to them, but if I miss anything, please pick me up on it. I think your first point was to do with loans. So the two policies that come to this committee and go on to Cabinet for approval require formal approval, but they sit within something called a collections development framework, which is quite a detailed document, and that does include a loans policy, but doesn't require sign off from Cabinet. So in terms of reassurance that there is a process for loans and that the items that we loan out are protected. That loans policy does go through that in detail. I'm very happy to share that with the committee if you would like to see it. It has been reviewed and updated. We have a clear process in terms of when we have requests for loans to make sure that where they go out to, they're suitable. We are keen to support people that want to have access to our collections that we aren't actively using in displays or exhibitions at a particular time, because that's the fundamental purpose for what we have. We do primarily loan to other accredited museums, so they have to adhere to the same sort of standards that we have. And I am pleased to say that the loans arrangements that we have in place, we haven't, certainly in recent years, had any issues where we've had damage. And the benefit that it gets by having those collections shared and the public benefit for people having access to them feels like it's a good thing to do. In terms of acquisitions, the acquisitions policy is actually set out here. So what you will see within the document is it talks about our collections and it splits them into different thematic areas just to try and make them a bit more digestible. And I'm just trying to find the right section. So if you look at section 4, it goes through all of the areas of the collection and it identifies where our focus for collecting will be. So in terms of when things are offered, initially they are assessed by our museum officers who are all trained curatorial staff. So they will look to see how those items fit within our collecting policy. We don't take anything where it's duplication. We won't take anything where it sits outside the scope of our policy. So as you will see within here, we collect within the boundaries of the county. We pay note to other museums that are collecting where there might be overlap, so we avoid duplication in collecting areas. So there is quite a robust sort of process, and all of those acquisitions have to be signed off by the collections and learning manager. Primarily, we collect reactively. So as I said in the summary, we really respond to donations. So the rate of acquisition is relatively minor. However, we do recognise that in some areas we have gaps in the collection, which is why we have identified the focus for proactive collection. But we don't have a purchase fund, so we are reliant on trying to work in project ways and build trust with communities so that they might offer items to come into the collection. And then your third point was about disposals. The disposal process is very robustly overseen. We take that process very seriously. And if you look from section 15, it talks you through the different elements of disposal. So it makes reference to Spectrum, the primary procedures of Spectrum, which give guidance to all museums about how we do that. We have to do that in a legal way. There are some disposals which are delegated to the Director of Adults and Community, so based on the recommendation of officers only, and then the Director can approve disposals. And in the event that there's a disposal that's deemed to be controversial, then that would actually come to members. So I hope that's helpful in a little way.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. It is helpful. However, it says on page 61, Museum Access Policy, Appendix A, which there is, and then later on there is a thing of disposal, but I cannot, there is no Appendix B, C, and D. And I think it might be very helpful for the ones who are, because there is, you know, it says A, but then it says Appendix D on top, which is quite, it's a museum's collection development policy, which is number C. So it would be kind of nice to have under appendices a link so we can, you know, look it up, because it is very, very confusing and I can't. Sorry.
Electronic versions have got all the appendices.
Oh, okay. I didn't realise that. I've got the paper one because I didn't have a computer.
Let's switch your mics off and Mr. King can then speak.
Thanks, Chair. So I've actually been to 3 of these museums, the Bosworth Battlefield, Marlborough Museum and Charnwood Museum. Which I managed to get to the other 2, but you know, I think overall our museums are pretty good. The problem I think we've got is you've got far too much stuff, and most of it never sees the light of day. So as someone who's interested in history and things like that, I imagine the list is very long. So the question I have is, what in this policy is going to enable you to get some of the material that you currently got in storage in huge kind of corner somewhere? There's some of it, and somewhere else there's some more of it. What's in here that's going to enable you to kind of enable us, our residents and communities, to see, interact with more of what we've got, basically, Shell? Because otherwise, what's the point in us keeping it? And you know, because otherwise we're kind of just hoarding things because we've been told. I know some of it we have to keep because the law says we have to. Why are we keeping it if no one can ever see it? I mean, that's fundamentally, you know, because ultimately we're all paying for that, and there's some huge mega warehouse we're supposed to buy to store it, which we can't afford. Is a debate about whether we can afford to do it or not. So, but that's a different point. But I mean, really, that's what I really want to understand. And I've read this a couple of times, and I don't really kind of get. Maybe I've missed it. So, over to you. Thank you.
Sorry. Museum collections are different to archive collections, so there is no statutory requirement for the council to have a museum service. I would highly suggest it's a real benefit to Leicestershire residents to have them. The purpose for our collections is to make sure that we are representative of all of the periods of history and all of the different communities across Leicestershire. I think it's common for people to focus on our publicly accessible museum sites that are seen as kind of the tourist destinations as being the only way that you can access collections, but they aren't. All of our collections repositories, is what we talk about them, are accessible to people and are well used by researchers and inquirers that come in, and we have staff that support people to access those collections. We have a very strong relationship, particularly with higher and further education colleges, where their students will come either to our venues to access material, or more commonly, because our spaces are quite small, where we take that material out to them so they can use that in their kind of research and their studies. We also have digital resources available. So there is something called the Museum Collections site, where you can see different aspects of the collections there. We have changing exhibition programmes across all of our sites, so the items that are on display rotate over a period of time. And we also work quite closely with different community groups where we use those collections to respond to project activity and work, so not constantly in spaces. But you are right, we do have a lot of material. We work very hard to make sure that the material that we retain is not duplicate, is not in poor condition, and has usable, which is why within the policy you'll see the section on rationalisation and review. We have an ongoing process of rationalisation which leads to disposal. So those reports regularly go through to the Director of Adults and Communities. And what we seek to do with any of our disposals in the first instance is to try and ensure that those collections find another home within the public domain. And we have had success with that regard. And on occasions that's not possible, and we may have to dispose by other means. So I'm not sure whether that necessarily answers your point, Mr. King, but that's the way that we are set up at the moment. And obviously, if members decide that they want a different approach to their collections, then that's something that we would respond to.
If I may, Chair. Well, thanks for that. Yes, so I know you have these other for people to come and look at the. Most people do that. A small number, relatively speaking, will be able to access these repositories, as you mentioned. But in terms of most residents, taxpayers of Leicestershire, what they see is the 5 museums that the county council is partners in. There are other museums I know that are parishes and private, charities. So I know see that mentioned in here. I do know that you do that. So I think the question still remains, if we were to try and put a fraction or a percentage on how much of the stuff you have in collections actually sees, is available for our public, the residents, to actually see without them having to make special arrangements to come and see it, or whatever it is, to turn up or want the, and I know stuff gets rotating. I've seen some of that, and that's really good. But irrespective of that, how much are we actually getting to see of the total collection, rather than how much is in storage and you have to have special arrangements, go and see it or look at it on a screen? I'm trying to understand. Thank you.
Perfectly legitimate question and comes up a lot. It's hard to give an exact figure, but our estimate would generally be between 5 to 8% of the collections are on display at any one time. That is pretty common for any museum across the country. And the challenge around disposal, to say you only want to keep what's on display at any one time, is that when you then do want to respond to a change, that you don't have that. I think the other thing that is quite important for us is that because the majority of the items that we have in our collections have been given by donation, we make a commitment on that transfer of title to care for those collections in perpetuity. So that doesn't prohibit us from disposing of them, but we would only put them forward for disposal when we feel that they have no further purpose.
Thank you.
Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. This is now slightly a different note, but this is what was done, I think, 4 years ago by the old chairman of this committee, was that all members had dates where we could actually go and look at these sites and see our collections. I don't think that's been given over to this committee yet to go and do. But then people on this committee can actually realise what is involved, what we store, where it's stored. That's how much we actually, well, this county council actually has. And it is absolutely fascinating to go and see those sites. I think there was done over 2 or 3 afternoons at each different site where you could go and have a look. I think that's something that might be worth doing again, so people can actually realise what we're actually talking about. I think at this point, people don't realise what's involved in all these collections. But it's something that you agree with doing, Chair, through with these people. It's very, very worthwhile doing.
I'd certainly be interested in going around seeing how much we've got, and obviously disposal seems an issue, and then the cost of storing them as well. If we've got such an amount, it seems daft for it not to be on display somewhere. I don't know. Yeah, we definitely need to go out on a visit and have a look, see what we've got and where it's stored. Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I can remember when Snipston was an issue, visiting that site, and there was a shed. This is the coach you saw, I think. There's a damn great stagecoach in a shed, and a sort of prototype aeroplane against the wall behind it. I'm like, bloody hell, this is just in a disused coal board building on the site. So you're right. I mean, that's the only bit of it I've ever visited. And I know where one of the other sites was, but I've never been to it. I forgot my other point now. I'll go to sleep. No, the people do use the collections, and they then get to public use. Because I've just finished reading the 2nd volume of the History of Market Harbour. I won't bore you, but every other picture in this book was credited to the County Council museums collection, because clearly the authors have gone, we need a picture from 1800 whatever it was, and they got photographs that we held, and then they're in a book that's publicly available to get how many thousands of copies they've sold. So there's the value of it. My slightly scurrilous thought was that these days there's an awful lot of this, and there's nothing in here about how we're going to deal with digital records for the future, but maybe you don't want to go there because that's probably a whole world of pain. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's fairly obvious that we are the newbies, and that people have more experience in this line, and it's good to hear that you rotate stuff. I mean, obviously, I think it's a good suggestion by Mr. Chapman that we actually get to see these areas, because there is an expense, and I appreciate people do donate things, and you feel as though you have to honour that by keeping them. But it's obviously something that we all need to see there. But I do appreciate that we are the newbies. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I'd just like to add that in Warwickshire, there's the Museum of the Third Light Dragoons, of which I've got a relative, and that is a virtual museum. You can go in, but it's also virtual. You can walk around the museum online. So, you know, there are other things than just having to visit a museum. So, right, thank you very much, everybody, for your inputs. Recommendation, the committee is asked to note the Leicestershire County Council Museum Policy Revision and Accreditation, which we have done, and our comments will be recorded in the minutes and passed on to the Cabinet for consideration. Is that agreed? Lovely. Right. Agenda item 12 is the overview of community life choices, day services. The report is at pages 123 to 128 of the agenda. Again, Indigit is presenting the report and is joined by Kate Revel, Head of Services, Commissioning and Quality, and Leah Philbin, Lead Commissioner. Indigit, over to you. Leah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Kate's not able to join us today, so we've got Leah here. So Leah is the Lead Commissioner for Working Age Adults Disabilities within my team. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what's in the report. So this report is it's been put together to give committee a bit more information, a bit more familiarisation with community life choices. So community life choices, I'll call it, its acronym is CLC. So essentially, it's what was referred to before as day services or day opportunities, but it's essentially commission contracts with the independent sector. So we commission a number of services from providers, many of whom are voluntary and community organisations, to provide day support for adults and older people who are assessed as eligible under adult social care for these services. The vast majority of people that we support in the services are working age adults and have a learning disability or physical impairment, and there's some provision for older people as well. The report highlights a number of key statistics, so it shows the number of people that we support. There's paragraphs in there around spend. The spend identified in there is the spend applicable to adult social care day support, or CLC. In addition to that, there is a transport cost as well, that's delivered by our environmental and transport services within the council. There is a further report that's coming in November of this year to Scrutiny Committee, which will highlight our proposed approach to our new procurement for the service. So the services that we've currently got in place are up until the end of August 2026. So we'll have to have new contracts in place for September the 1st, 2026. So committee are going to receive a report in November highlighting our approach, taken on board discussions on previous discussions with committee and cabinet as well on approach to competition and pricing as well. So that's something that we're certainly considering and looking to implement within the new services. But this report is hoping that it gives you something that when we come in November, you're more familiar with the services. It's not fresh, so you've got, I guess you'll be well armed to give us more feedback on our commissioning process in November, really. I mean, Leah, is there anything else you want to add on that? But it is mainly an overview report in prep for November.
I just wanted to add as well that it does include managed personal assistance. So it is, as Indy said, day opportunities. So it's often referred to as day services, but there's also managed personal assistance as well. And obviously that is detailed a little bit more in the report, but I just wanted to cover that the framework essentially covers both of those areas. Thank you.
Mr. Abbott, is there anything you wish to add?
at present.
Mrs. Broadsley.
Can I ask how many of these services are out of county, or are they all in county? I know that some people with complex needs, if there isn't a provision within the county, they tend to go out of county, which obviously then has an add-on effect of the transport costs. And given that there is issues with transport, I'm just wondering what sort of numbers you're talking about that are out of county.
So the report details, so I think on the framework, it's about just under 600 people that we support in the framework. They're all in-county providers though, so the contracts are for in-county provision. I wouldn't be able to tell you if we support anyone in an out-of-county day opportunity though. It's something I can come back to you with, Mrs. Broadley. If any, it will be quite small. Most of our provision is able to support people within the county. But if there is, I'll come back to you and let you know.
So there is a small number of providers services that might be just over the border as well, such as Leicester City. But as Indy said, we have I'm not giving you an exact number, but we'll come back to you. But we are able to meet the majority of provision within the county. We do work hard to have oversight of the market to ensure that we do have adequate supply, just to minimise people having to travel out of county.
Also, also, if we're the majority are within the county, I know from quite a few years ago, we used to take people from the city as well. So therefore, if we're looking at numbers, how many residents, how many people do we take from out of county, as well as us putting them out there? How many do we actually take in for services? I know it used to be quite large, and then I don't know quite what happened, but I know everybody sort of went their own way, and Leicester City took back their residents, their service users, and county kept theirs. So I'm just wondering how many we actually take in from other councils.
Okay, so we're responsible for those people that live within Leicestershire County Council kind of geography. So the services that we commission are with, let's say 30, I think it's about 30 providers, yeah. So 30 providers. So of the 30 providers, so everyone that we fund, purely Leicestershire County Council, Leicester City can place themselves into our provision, but that's up to them. They have to have their own contract with that provider. They have to fund that person as well. So it's kind of, they can use our services, but we don't have any interaction with them. Different to, so I think I get what your point is. A few years ago, we did have our own internal day services, so there was some usage from Leicester City into our services. That, from what I understand, though, and what should have happened, and I believe it did, they would have had to have paid the council to use those services. But because we don't have that internal provision anymore, it's kind of like a contractor to council relationship, as opposed to council to council.
So because we no longer have in-house services, what you're saying is you commission these 30 companies to do it for you. And then because of that, you're not getting paid from Leicester City Council if they want. So has the service, by getting rid of in-house services, been cost effective? Has it actually made a saving? Because I know that the in-house services that we used to have were fantastic. I mean, you couldn't fault them. There are a couple of issues with, people that are providing the service from not me, but from a parental point of view. I have some residents who have actually aren't happy with the service that's now provided. So I just want to know that we got rid of all the in-house service. Has it been cost effective? Have we made a big saving? And is it better for service users?
Thank you again. Fair, great points. So there was a report. There would have been a report when we closed the in-house services and moved people over to the CLC framework. There was quite a significant saving. I don't know the figure. It's quite a significant saving. I think the reason for that when you have an in-house service, essentially your staffing structure, 10 people, say for argument's sake, a manager, etc. You might have 2 people at the service, or you might have 20 people at the service. That cost is static. If you've got 20 people, great. If you drop to 2, your unit cost starts to escalate. So essentially you're paying for void costs. Within our CLC framework, we only pay for what's delivered. So whatever we buy for. So that the company can, like you said, we can get people from Leicester City or Rutland or whatever. They can put more people in, but we'll only pay for the 5 people that we run there, even if there's a capacity of 50. So essentially that, I'm not going to call it saving, but we're using our provision more efficiently. So we're not essentially paying for stuff that we're not getting. So there's always going to be a more cost efficient way of doing in services like this. Question around whether we've seen a decrease in quality. I mean, we've got, as I said before, we've got. I mean, I consider our CLC provision to be a good level. We've got, out of all the care markets that we've got, we've got a lot of kind of voluntary community charities organisations that the ethos of the way they work is very. It's very caring. It's very kind of focused on the person, and I'm not saying others aren't. Don't quote me on that, but it's less businessy and more kind of people focused. Even though they're very they're very astute and they get what they're doing. They've changed over the years, but it's a very different market to other markets. So I'd say we're quite happy with the quality levels that are delivered at the moment. Okay, Mrs. Broadley. I mean, there's always going to be instances of people that stuff happens in care sectors. So we know that we've got equality. Again, going back to previous discussions at Scrutiny and Cabinet, we have the same quality assurance process and the contractual process that we go through as well. So we've got officers assigned with all the providers. They'll go out and do checks and monitoring, etc. We'll speak to people on the ground. We look at social worker reviews. We'll do our own calls out to people as well. So a lot goes on around that.
Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the reports. Quite useful. Gives us the sort of skeleton of information. But number of queries I've got. So first of all, in respect of the table under section 11, is that just related to people who receive a service, i.e. the actual cared for person, or does that also include carers? That's the first question. Just clarify that if we can, please.
Cared for.
Just the cared for. All right. So do those figures also include the people who receive direct payments and choose to, or go basically spend the money on whatever service they feel is appropriate to them?
So that's the number of people who access our frameworks. That's who we buy services on behalf. So there'd be another cohort of people who use a direct payment to buy services from these providers as well.
Okay, so there's an additional number of people who have been assessed as needing care and support, which can't be met. So they've got unmet needs as per paragraph 10, but they've chosen to receive a direct payment as against accessing support through our care framework. That's what you've just said, as I understood. So do you have any idea how many people that is on a similar basis as to what you've listed here at all? You haven't got those figures. Are you able to have it? Let us have those.
Yeah, we can send you the figures.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yep. So just then following on then to paragraph 15, where it talks about the cost being 8.6 million. Now I know that doesn't include the transport costs, but does that 8.6 million, does that also, from what you've just said then, I'm assuming that doesn't include the people who receive the direct payments. So I'm just trying to understand what the totality of this service and our provision of support is for those people who've had an assessment, adults who've had an assessment where we can't meet their needs, how much are we actually having to set, what's the budget in totality, not just for those accessing the framework, but also the direct payment side, because obviously they can then go and spend it on whatever they wish. Okay. So yeah, go on.
Yeah, come back on that. So we can get that information across the committee around that.
That's great. Okay, thank you. And
just add something. It's
yeah.
not, direct payments aren't just for where people. For the majority of the time, it's actually about the person choosing to purchase the care rather than the council being unable to purchase it through the framework. So I just wanted to clarify, for a lot of people, it's about the choice and flexibility it gives them, which is why they choose to use direct payment.
I understand that. Okay. I understand that. I've family members who've been involved in this, so I understand that. So what I just wanted to ask you about was the commissioning and bandings then. So the where it talks about hourly rates, do these hourly rates meet the requirements of the minimum wage, national living wage, the actual, because if someone's paying for a PA, for example, the PA then has to pay, because they're effectively they're employed by the cared for person, aren't they? So therefore the cared for person's got to pay their employer's national insurance 15% plus their all the other kind of taxes that might be applicable. So does the do those bandings reflect that ability for that person to do that, or have they got to find money from somewhere else to pay? Obviously we've just had some big increases in taxation on national insurance, and then national minimum wage has gone up, the national living wage has gone up. So I'm just trying to understand what those hourly rates are actually based on, how they're put together, because £17.14 per hour doesn't seem an awful lot to take account of that. That seems like minimum wage to me. So I'm just wondering what we're doing, and if there is an uplift in the minimum wage, because obviously inflation is running relatively a lot higher than what was predicted in the budget. Do these figures then get increased, or do they stay at that? Sorry, there's quite a lot of questions there, but I'm just trying to understand that, because it doesn't talk about that anywhere. But if we're looking at a review, that's the sort of information we're going to need to know. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So just to clarify, for our band F, which is our community one-to-one support, which includes the personal assistant, for packages commissioned through this route, they are not employed by the person. There is an agency involved. So it is slightly different, which is why I clarified at the start, there's various different types of personal assistant. But just to be clear on that they would be employed by an agency. The £17.14 per hour that you've mentioned is band E, and that is actually an addition to an existing package. That's not the community one-to-one rate. So I kind of just mentioned it briefly, but essentially, if we have somebody who receives, for example, band D, which is one-to-one in a day service setting, and they require additional one-to-one, for example, it might take 2 people to support the person with certain personal care needs, then that is where the band E would come in. And it's calculated as an addition because the overhead costs and things like that are taken into account with the day service rates have already been covered, and the £17.14 is for those additional elements of care. The band F is the one-to-one PA rate, which is £21.47 an hour. They've been calculated on average weekly earnings, but consideration is also given as part of our uplifts into national living wage. But we are also, as part of the recommissioning review, the way that we do provide our uplifts, because there are other services within Leicestershire that are uplifted against national living wage. So that is something that we're looking at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Ultimately, these services do get uplifted every year.
Yeah.
So if there's changes in obviously inflation, etc., they do go uplifted every year. When we do present back in when we do present in November, there'll be more details around the different models, what we're looking at, any new bandings we're looking at, and how the payment structure will work as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Recommendation, the report is an update for us to note. The committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Oh.
Sorry, Chairman, I've got a question. Had my hand up. I would like to go on a different tack, if I may, please, because everything we seem to be doing tends to be very much in a silo. Now, this, to me, lends itself very much in working outside the silo and dovetailing into other services. Now, earlier on, I've been harping on about, for instance, using our libraries a little bit more. And in my area, we've got lots of vacant allotments. There is a perfectly good leisure centre with swimming facility. So how can this service be dovetailed into and access already existing facilities? So by rather than saying, oh yes, here is a personal PA and here is a contractor who we're paying a lot of money, why don't you go, you know, to the leisure centre where there are arrangements which are made via county council. Here is the library where we're setting up. We used to have computer services. We used to have these reading champions, like I said, where all of the people who are in this work stream can access that in already existing provisions. And then in your paragraph 22, where a person needs transport to access, it's commissioned separately. Now we give transport grants. You know, we work with, you know, Lutterworth Community Transport, the Bowdens and whatever, where we can put that into our service contracts. So I provided with my last highways fund a bus, you know, an electric bus, which does all of that. But now they're all short of funding because the criteria county is doing and whatever is just becoming off the scale. So my question is really, how is this service working outside the silo to access other services which are already there to enhance the offer? And not only does that give extra opportunities, but it would cut the cost. So, you know, talk me around it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are really keen to make sure that our services do function as part of the community, and I think we have a fantastic offer within CLC for that. Many of our services do access community assets like that, and for many people it's about the support they may require to access some of these services. So that is a factor as to why people may choose to use, for example, a personal assistant, which might then allow them to go to swimming baths or go to a library. Our services are also very focused around achieving outcomes for people. So for somebody that might want to be able to access a library independently, it might be about doing travel training with them, or it might be about building their confidence up. So in terms of, I'm not sure if you was meaning people accessing those things instead of CLC. I think that would form part of their assessment and be around what their needs are for support. But I think our services within CLC are very community focused to try to avoid people being isolated ultimately, and empowering people to be able to access the community. If you want to add anything, Indy.
Thank you. So you do cover that, I assume, within the next report and cover these offers. So people and people who are looking for a PA, they are also then advised that they can do that, so that they're not kind of just relying on the prescribed schedules. Do I understand that?
So as part of someone's assessed needs, so someone has an assessment and then they've got, they state what their outcomes are, what their preferences are, etc. And we'll look at those and we'll look at, what do they want to achieve in life, etc. So if they've got a PA for, say, 3 hours a day, for argument's sake, it's not for the PA to prescribe, we're going to go here and do that. If the person wants to go swimming, or if they want to go and access a library, leisure, that's their call. and that support package will work around that person's want. Yeah. And just a final quick point, linking back to the first report we did, the Preparing for Adulthood. So something we're looking at as part of this contract is how do we gear up providers here to support people with independent living skills, and what can they bring to the table as well as part of the model. I don't think we'll be ready for it as part on day one of this tender, but we're going to try and build it into the contract that actually says maybe in year one, end of year one, we can use the contract to do that a little bit differently. There'll be some incentives to it, but actually in the longer run, it will work out for us as a council and for the people.
Thank you. Right, the recommendation is the report is an update for us to note. The committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. Agreed? Lovely. Right. And the final item at the agenda is item 13, is the draft Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board Annual Report 2024-2025 at pages 129 to 198 of the agenda pack. Joining us today, we have the independent chair of the board, Siona Douglas, who will present this item. Gary Watts, Safeguarding Partnership Manager, is also with us today.
Do you want to? You're right.
So whilst Gary's sitting there, I'll introduce myself. Good afternoon. It's really good to be here today. I'm Siona Douglas. I'm the independent chair of the Safeguarding Adults Leicestershire and Rutland. So just to kind of explain the setup for those who may not be familiar with the Safeguarding Adults Board. Leicestershire and Rutland are in a joint board along with Leicester City, but we produce two annual reports, one for Leicestershire and Rutland, but we have one board and we share the majority of the subgroup. I will explain some of them. My role as chair is I'm appointed independently with the partnership, which covers health colleagues, sector colleagues, and the police and social care, local housing. And my role is to chair the board and oversee the work and come to you on an annual basis with an annual report, work that's been undertaken throughout the year from a strategic perspective. So I've just put a short presentation together. There's about 10 slides. I will go through some of them really quickly, and I will pick up some of the elements of you've had in front of you. You'll have the annual report, and you'll also have the strategic document, which is our 3 to 5 year plan for the work of the Safeguarding Adults Board. Gary's going to ably take us through. Thank you, Gary. So just to set the context, is the Care Act 2014 required each local authority area to set up an adult safeguarding board. So there are numbers of safeguarding boards in local authority areas across the country, and some are combined boards with some local authority areas, so they join together like Leicestershire and Rutland, Leicester City, and some operate on their own, but I'll explain some of the synergies of the advantages for Leicestershire and Rutland in that, because the partners, so example, health partners and police, are coterminous with that patch. So that means that we get a good spread of challenge and learning through that, and it means that partner colleagues are aligned with the county council basis. Thanks. So we work under the 6 safeguarding principles, which all you probably have heard from your local authority colleagues and health colleagues in other presentations that underpin all safeguarding adults work. And those are empowerment, about people being supported, encouraged to make decisions with informed consent; prevention, it's better to take action before harm occurs; proportionality, we try to be the least intrusive response appropriate to the risk presented; protection, to support and representation for those in greatest need and those at greatest risk; partnership, finding local solutions through services working with their communities, that they play a part in preventing, detecting and reporting neglect and abuse. Similar to members, you are in your communities and you will see issues that may be of concern, and you're part of that framework. And accountability. Oh, sorry. Okay. And accountability and transparency in safeguarding practice. So these are the principles within the legislation and the guidance which inform all of the safeguarding work, both within the boards and within all the organisations that undertake any aspects of safeguarding adults work. So the structure of the board is that we have the local safeguarding adults board, and there are partners meetings, and those partners meetings are generally the statutory partners, which is the local authority, health and police. And they meet once every 6 weeks or so, and we also meet across with children's safeguarding adults board. So the chair for the children's services and myself meet together with the partners, because there is lots of work that can transition across the 2 boards. And underpinning that are a number of subgroups. And I'm sorry that it's small. On the next page, there's more detail of the names to help you. But all of the subgroups that underpin the work are chaired across the partnership. So they may be local authority, police or health representatives. And we have the procedures subgroup, the performance subgroup, the audit subgroup, the learning and development subgroup, the voluntary subgroup. The only subgroup that is distinct to Leicestershire and Rutland and the Leicester City is what's called the case review subgroup, because the city have its own and Leicestershire and Rutland have its own, and I'll explain on the next slide. So the role of the Safeguarding Adults Board is about assuring itself that local safeguarding arrangements are in place as defined by the Care Act and statutory guidance, assuring itself that safeguarding practice is person-centred and outcome-focused, working collaboratively to prevent abuse and neglect where possible, ensuring agencies give timely and proportionate responses when abuse and neglect has occurred. And listening to some of your conversations today was hearing some of those debates about timeliness and proportionality, and assuring itself that safeguarding practice is continually improving and enhancing the quality of life of adults in its area. And there's 3 core duties laid down in statute. One is to have a strategic plan setting out how the Safeguarding Adults Board will meet its objectives with the member partners. One is to publish an annual report, which I'm here today to present to you. And the third is to commission Safeguarding Adults reviews, which we commonly call SARS, for a case that meets the criteria, which is outlined in Action Section 44 of the Care Act. So just to take the element of the Safeguarding Adults review a little further so that it sets some context, is that boards are mandated to conduct reviews where adults with care and support needs have died or experienced serious abuse or neglect, and where agencies did not work well together to mitigate any abuse and harm. Where safeguarding adult practice can be improved, it's by identifying and helping what was hindering that work, and in order to tackle the barriers of good practice to protect adults from safe and harm. So it is about learning, it is not about blame, it's about improving practice, and it's a process by which we look at all partners. It isn't a single agency focus, it is where multi-agency working could be improved. And that learning is shared to maximise the learning. And on our website for the board, there are a number of safeguarding adults reviews that have been conducted over the years in the interest of transparency for people to see and the public to read as they wish. Obviously, most are anonymised, but some families do like to have their loved one's name mentioned, and we take account of that. But you will see a number of those over the years. Next slide. So I think it's important just to bring to us what our core priorities are for particularly Leicestershire and Rutland. And we've got two core priorities, which are ensuring statutory compliance with the legislation and the guidance and enhancing everybody's business. It's everybody's business safeguarding, whoever we are, wherever we work, and whoever we are in the community. And then we have some developmental priorities, which are about strengthening the user and carer engagement with people who do have access to services, raising awareness within our diverse communities, understanding how well we work together, and prevention being the key to how to keep people safe and connected and resilient to reduce the likelihood of harm. And just to kind of now link that with some of the work in the report is that we use a number of processes to inform the board of those things. Within that context, we always set some business priorities for the year where there's specific work that we focus on, which is usually informed by the data that we have. It is informed by any case file or audits that have taken place where there's been learning identified, and also from any safeguarding adults reviews. So every year we refresh the priorities to focus on in order to address any learning in that year. And in the past year, we've been focusing on mental capacity, domestic abuse, self-neglect and safety plans. So that we've had some focused work because of learning around that, and in the report you will see some of the findings and the learning that's taken place. And we also use a lot of the national work that takes place, so we're not in isolation. We do look to partners to do benchmarking, and we do look to the National Safeguarding Adults Review Library to do some learning. And one of the new areas of work that's come under the Safeguarding Adults Board has been street homelessness. Because of the vulnerability of people, that has now been brought into under statutory guidance, that is now part of our explorations going forward about the number of people living on the street and those who may be very vulnerable and have died, and we're beginning to track all of those people to look at the reasons why that is, and could, if partners had intervened earlier, could there have been any prevention of those serious incidents occurring. The other areas that we've been working on is around ethnicity and ensuring that we're targeting some of the communities that are more marginalised, where we're not reaching them. And there's a number of diverse communities living in our country that we need to be ensuring that we're meeting everybody's needs equally. And so we've done some considerable work around ensuring that we're trying to target those areas of diverse communities to ensure they receive the messages in languages that are relevant and in a way that's conducive to their community, so that they can be part of our developing country and our developing area, and ensure that they know how to access services when they're required. Takes to the next slide, I think. So what I thought would just do as a kind of end, this is a 2-minute video which is on our website, but I think this gives a bit of a flavour of some of the work that's been undertaken, particularly around the topic of self-neglect. And I just thought I would end this presentation to you by just watching this short video.
In 1995,
Might get something else now. It was working. It's on the YouTube website, isn't it? Technology. Onto the website. Oh, thanks.
Looking for dining room furniture? Get it out of your head and into your home.
Rolo Dessert. Too good to share.
Everyone is different, and we're free to make our own choices about how we live and what is healthy for us. But sometimes, a traumatic event, lots of stress, or an illness or disability that may get worse over time can make living our lives more difficult to manage. Like mess in a room, self-neglect can build up slowly, so it's hard to pinpoint exactly when it becomes a worry. Shame also builds up and can make it harder for people to ask for help. Here are a few things that you can look for in yourself or someone you know that are signs that things have started to get out of control. Have any important appointments or medications been missed? Has there been a change in their usual appearance? Has there been a noticeable change in mood or usual routines, like not wanting to go out or see people? Is there enough food in the house to make a meal? Or is the fridge empty or full of food that's gone off? Have alcohol and drugs, or even the amount of time spent online, become more of an issue recently? Some people who self-neglect will try to build self-esteem by looking after things or even animals. Perhaps the home is now so full of things and/or animals that they don't want people to see how they live, or it's become difficult or even dangerous to live in. Does the house need major repairs? There may be times when someone loses their ability or mental capacity to make their own decisions, or is unable to take steps to protect themselves, but there is a wide range of support available. If you are worried about yourself or someone else, we know it may be difficult to do, but it's important to reach out and ask for help and advice as early as possible, even if you don't think they are currently ready to accept help. When you reach out, you will be listened to, and we will work with you at your own pace, based on what you want to happen. So please, don't wait. Get in contact today.
Thank you. It's the see something, say something is our kind of cut line to try and encourage and target our resources. So just a little kind of something of what we're trying to get the messages out into the public domain so people understand what issues are relevant to safeguarding. And with that in mind, and with the learning that we've done in the last year, the priorities that we'll be looking at for the next 2 years in 2025 to 2027 are equality, diversity and inclusion, timeless and proportionality, and the impact of learning. Excuse me. So we're just trying to kind of prepare and this year work on those priorities, given where we've been and the learning that's been taken place. I'll hold there, Chair.
Thank you, most informative. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Mr. King?
Yeah, thank you for your report and your presentation. There were two questions I had. So first of all, on page 174, you've got the attendance at meetings list. I did a quick calculation earlier. That's about 21% of all the people who are supposed to attend your meetings are classed as apologies. That to me seems, I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but to me that seems, and also some of them seem to have quite a lot of apologies. So that's concerning me, which you just mentioned how important it is, and yet here we are, people who've been appointed by their respective organisations to be part of your organisation not showing up, or they're sending somebody else as a substitute. So what are you doing as chair to sort this out? Because that's concerning me.
Thank you for your question. Really important to flag those things. There are some people who haven't been attending, and that my role is to take that up with that organisation. One of the issues is that it does change over time, because some of the people are frontline workers, so we get apologies late. Some people we don't get apologies with at all. So it is my role to take that up with the organisation in order to get that representation. Each meeting does need to be quorate, so there does have to be a representative from at least the local authority, police and health in order for any meeting or subgroup to take place. So there is a requirement around the quoracy of that. One of the other issues is membership does change, and one of the things that I'm trying to address is some consistency in membership of groups, because if you don't get the consistency, you're not able to follow the work through. I am at the mercy of the organisations in this. We do have a number of organisations where there are solid representation, as you will see. Others, because they are frontline workers, sometimes get called away in emergencies, and so they're substitutes. And I know it's having to live within that issue, but it is continually drawing that up, which is why we, in fact, it was one of the meetings I came to when I first presented a report a couple of years ago that asked for this to be in there, and so this is why it's presented, because it is very evident what the issues are. But I am at the mercy of the organisations in continually addressing that, and I can't enforce it. I can just highlight and try and influence the importance of those processes and those meetings.
Okay, well, I think that's obviously, you're the chair of the board. You've been appointed to deal with this, not just this, but manage everything. So really, I'd say that it's definitely, with you and these organisations, you need to find a way to resolve that. But if I could just go back to my second point, was about finance. Now, I see in the report that in the year 23, 24, and 24, 25, you had this identical level of income, and however, your running cost expenditure increased significantly in 24, 25. And I note in the bottom it says that so there was more expenditure than the income you received. So it says that you've used some money from reserves. So can I just ask the question, how much money does your organisation have in reserves? And are you expecting any of the contributing paying partners, if I can put it like that, because there are obviously other partners who don't pay anything, are they expecting to keep the level of contribution flat for next year? Are you expecting that? If so, what are you doing to get the expenditure down to meet the income? Or have you got a lot of money in reserves? If so, how much have you got? Sorry to be so blunt.
No, absolutely. No, it's absolutely quite fair question. So what I would say to you is that Safeguarding Adults boards have generally worked on a goodwill basis in the past, and that since I've become chair, I've been trying to get more of a stabilised approach to a regular review of the finances and a kind of percentage increase every year in order to meet costs, because a lot of the times partners have placed the money, and it's a historical issue at the moment around the amounts they spend, they submit, and it's been flatlined. So they've contributed the same amount for a number of years. Bringing this into the report is my attempt to try and flesh out those issues and to ensure that there's some accountability with the partners in terms of their contributions to the board.
One of the dilemmas is that the children's and adult safeguarding boards are combined in the finances across the whole of the patch. And so it has usually been that the reserves have been shared between adults and children's, and we've been able to draw on those. But it does flesh out the fact that I would like a much more, in fact, we had the meeting of the day where I said I want a much more sustainable process going forward, because we have salaries where there are salary increases on an annual basis. And we have safeguarding adults reviews where when we have a review, we commission external authors to undertake those reviews. We have been doing more of those reviews in a different way. So if an organisation hasn't been involved, they may take on the role of undertaking that review. And in the board offices in both Leicester City and Leicestershire and Rutland, there are experienced social care professionals who have undertaken those reviews if they've not been involved, sort of a counter agreement with each other, in order to save some of the money and also to get the learning out quickly. But this is a critical stage, as we've outlined where we are this year, and that is something that the partners need to decide. A, are they going to contribute, and if so, can we have a memorandum of understanding, which is what I would like in place for all partners in order to ensure sustainability for the process of the finances, and also something that is regular, and particularly with the ICBs changing, I've been saying we need to get that in place. So the meeting the other day was about this very issue, about having something sustainable and agreed moving forward, but we aren't there at this point in time.
If I may, could you just say how much you've got in reserves then?
Oh, sorry. It's 117,000.
Thank you.
Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of 55 references, because I checked, to mental capacity in this report, or the whole paper. The Mental Capacity Act's been around since 2005, so I was a bit surprised to see everybody having to be trained. You think it'd kind of be embedded and they'd all know what it's all about and how to apply it and da-da-da-da-da. So have we been under-assessing mental capacity or over-assessing it, if you see where I'm coming from? Because it's a pretty vital thing to dealing with, say, people who hoard and stuff like that. And that slightly concerns me that we sort of, oh, look, there's this Mental Capacity Act. It's not new and shiny. It's been around a hell of a long time and people should be dealing with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is concerning, and that's why there's been so much work undertaken. And I think that is some of the questions that we've been asking is, after this period of time, why would we not be better equipped? And this is across all organisations, which is why there's been a huge investment in this last 2-year period to ensure that all organisations have a responsibility for assessing mental capacity, not just the local authority. There are wider issues. So that's why we've undertaken the amount of work, and the Safeguarding Adults reviews were flagging mental capacity as an issue. It isn't just a localised issue within this patch. It is a national issue that is coming out in the national Safeguarding Adults reviews, which is of a concerning nature, which is why we've undertaken that significant area of work over the last couple of years.
Mrs. Page.
Thank you. As this is a statutory report, and as I can't breathe again, as this is a golden thread that runs through all of the partners, I was wondering how you're looking to, because I know this just has to be published, but how do you see it to be more effective being taken forward? Do you know what I'm...
Yes, so I guess there's a statutory requirement to report on the work that's been undertaken, and therefore that learning has to be integrated within the organisations. And what we tend to do is we do self-assessments on a biannual basis with each organisation completes a full self-assessment in order to assess where they're at, and then we benchmark back is where the progress has been within that period of time. So the self-assessment also informs on the area of work. One of the issues is around ensuring that things move forward, and that's the mental capacity question is a really relevant one in terms of your question, is how do we know? Well, that's why we're putting the investment in. We then need to be testing that it's not continually coming up as an area of practice. But this is not a one-off process. This is a continual basis as staffing changes, as complexities of people's needs change, and we know that we deal with a lot more complexities than we have done in the past. It is an evolving wheel that is continually turning, of continual learning and development. It isn't just static at a point in time.
If I may come back through, Chairman. So on page 196, where is the Appendix 3, and we have got all of the membership, and then we've got the individual membership. So say we've got one member of the prison and one member of the district councils. So in order for this to be effective, do you expect all of these to feed back to you, and can that be monitored?
So it is the board members' responsibility to take that information and to ensure the learning within their own organisations. The way of managing that is through the audit processes. But how do we know? What's the impact of what we've done is the question I ask. What is the impact of that process? What's the impact of that procedure? Okay, we have a new procedure. What's the impact of that? How does that look in practice? And the audits therefore then look at some of that. The self-assessment also looks at that. But it's not just about people assuring me, they need to be assuring and challenging each other. I chair the board, but actually it is a partnership, and the partners have that equal responsibility for the challenge within the board themselves and the subgroups.
So I'm a district councillor as well, so when this report comes to the district council, I don't just want to stamp off the report. I actually should be asking those relevant questions which should be underpinning the introduction to the report to the members as well. Am I correct?
You're absolutely right, councillor. That is your assurance. How far do you know? And you are the eyes and ears of that process in supporting me to ensure actually where is this in the district council? The district council representatives should be feeding that through and pulling out the learning. Housing is a really relevant element. We've got housing very much engaged on the board as part of that process. But yes, absolutely, that's the questions for your assurance as well.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to withdraw my question, but I'm not sure I'm on the same wavelength. But we've had a lot of discussion around this table, and we're very concerned about what we've heard today and how things have been addressed and maybe not been addressed from some of my colleagues. And we mention here about technology, IT, and references to meetings, etc. But having watched that video, I was very concerned that you're moving forward with diversity and languages and investments into the next stages, that we're not quite there with what we're doing now. I watched that video, it's quite alarming. Communities, libraries, etc. Those sort of places where we're getting people back in communities, caring about the neighbours, etc. Because that video really highlights where the problem lies. And when I listen to what's being said, I'm just a bit concerned that we're moving forward without fixing what we've got. I hope I've not spoke out of terms here, but that's how I see it.
No, I guess I'm would like to know what you mean about fixing what we've got, because just to set some clarity so I can answer your question effectively. I guess the issue is that these are the things that happen in communities, and the awareness that, producing this sort of information is to try and ensure that wider awareness within those local communities. And you're quite right, is places such as libraries, pubs, people meet in pubs for coffee and lunches. They're the sorts of other places within the community halls, churches, mosques. There's loads of places, and it's trying to get those messages to all of those parts of the community so that they can undertake and report and be aware of others' needs is what we're trying to achieve. Now, you know, it's a journey, and you know, you've highlighted things that are concerning, but I think that's why we're trying to do the work we're doing around ensuring that we're hearing the messages from people and putting that learning into place, and trying to assure ourselves of all organisations for the board members to be responsible for getting those messages into the frontline communities where they need to be. I don't know whether I've answered your question, and I'm sorry. Do come back to me if I haven't.
Chair, may I reply? Thank you. Thank you for that. And yes, I apologise if I'm a bit naive. You wasn't here for the old meeting, which I know you wasn't, but I was just reflecting on what we today. Some of the guys around here will know that I started up a mental health group recently. I went to the county hall library, the local library. I had to do it myself because, as a lady over there said that's gone now, she sat on the phone for over an hour, and I just feel as though the system's failing. I got no help. No one answered that phone. And in the end, I decided my business would pay to start up a group for mental health. We're now up to 12 men, and we're doing fantastic. And I look at the reality of what's going on out there. So when I go back to the video, I'm referring to hands-on and moving forward. And I just feel as though, I guess in business, you wouldn't move forward until you've got it right in the first place. And when I hear you talking about other groups and other ways of moving forward, I'm just concerned that video, in my experience, that it's not really there. I don't feel as though it's really there. That's where I feel.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I didn't quite understand your question at the beginning. My apologies. I think that it's fair to say that all of the partners are under extreme pressures to deliver to increasing numbers of people, and there are lots of pressures out there for people in the community to be able to access services and get the resources that they need. And it's not confined just to one organisation. All organisations are struggling, and it's a really difficult place to be for some people, because they don't always get the service they need at the outset. What we're trying to do is ensure that we try and get the messages and encourage, I mean, the local authorities and health colleagues encourage the formation of groups in the communities, and do try and kind of galvanise those groups more so that people are linked up. But yes, the reality is that this is symptomatic of some of the issues that are happening, and that if more people are aware, then people will, you know, at least people may be getting something that prevents them. It may be an appointment with a GP, it may even be with a nurse, it may be to be linked up with a social group in the local village hall. Sometimes it's the very small, simple things that make a difference rather than the big things. And if people are aware and catch things early, then people make a difference, and they don't come to the attention of statutory services because they're getting their needs met. But it is a challenging environment for all our colleagues to meet the ever-increasing demands that we see in services today.
I've got a quick question. I read through this, and it's all about governance, reporting, training. Where's the help coming from, apart from a few telephone numbers?
So in here, you will see that there are through it a bit more of the voice of the person, which was something I talked about last year, was getting the voice of people into the report to make it more alive. But it is about the setting of a strategic framework. That is the role of the board, but it is the role of the partners who deliver that at an operational level to do that. And the work that we do is trying to check and assure ourselves of that to improve that practice. But yes, that is why we're very keen to develop, and I'm certainly really keen to get much more engagement of people, carers, involved in our safeguarding world. The challenge that people will say is that if you've been the result of a safeguarding inquiry, quite often you don't want to be talking about it, you want to get on with your life. And so it is about trying to find other means of having reference groups where perhaps people look at the literature, they can inform us, but much more in targeting those people that can help and inform, because that's the only way you know if you're effective, if you get the feedback. And there are some examples where there's been some really good feedback from people who've been the result of safeguarding inquiries, and people have felt
their voices were heard by partners, and they have felt that it has changed their lives. And so it's really important that we hear some of those messages, because there are some really good things going on out there, and there are practitioners working really hard in communities, frontline professionals, to help keep people safe and at home as long as they possibly can.
I note the report is seeking the views of the committee. I trust that the comments made by members today will be included when the report is presented to Cabinet. Recommendation, could I ask the members note the report? Is that agreed? 14, date of the next meeting. Members are asked to note the date of the next meeting is on 3rd of November 2025. Any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent? As I stated at the start of the meeting, I have no urgent items. That now concludes today's meeting. Thank you.